not pushing you, Jamie.
Here we are, good. So
Okay.
we'll call to order the meeting of the Harwich Conservation Commission again for March 16th, 2022. First item that we have on the agenda is a request for a determination of applicability for Zero Deep Hole Road. Mr. Knight, it's all yours.
Good evening, Dean Knight, representing Knight Nominee Trust of Zero Deep Hole Road. So last year I had administrative review to basically go in and try to clean up some of the invasive vegetation and some fallen down trees, dangerous trees. If you know the location, it got hit pretty hard at the with that tornado that went through, and then all the subsequent nor'easters that went through. So I had that in place from about maybe March of last year, or February of last year, and it expired. And I had discussions with Amy about trying to renew that, and it was suggested that I try to get an RDA to continue any further work in the property. So the property is a little over 4 acres. It was originally a cranberry bog back from 100 years ago, roughly 100 years ago, and I'm not sure it's been used since the 1960s. So it's got full, significantly sized trees in it. It also has a herring run that goes from Skinnequit Pond out and around to Red River, running through it. My goal is to try to continue to clean up the invasive species in it, particularly the greenbrier, which you just get destroyed walking through, the raspberries, and basically make it safe to be on the property, and additionally be able to walk from my house to the pond to go fishing without having to get mauled by the greenbrier barbed wires or have to walk through the herring run to get up there. So what I've submitted is roughly a path that I'd like to try to create and maintain, as well as some of the areas that have more extensive overgrowth to try to get it under control. I don't know if, when we were out maybe 14 days ago or so, or 16, 18 days ago, did Melissa have any photos that were taken? I know you had asked her.
We do have them, I'm sorry. I took
So-
a few of them out there today, actually.
All right, well, I've got a few photos of kind of what it looks like, if you want
She
me
may
to
have,
pass,
but okay, go
pass
ahead.
it around, or.
To Ernie or Brad.
And actually, last year, Mr. Chase was out with me as well with former assistant,
Yeah, Nikki.
Nikki, conservation administrator. And I'd also like to, in addition to the path, be able to get access to the pond. If you look at where the herring run enters, pretty much everything to the east of it are homes and pretty well developed, grass going down to the almost to the water's edge. And on the west side, it's pretty heavily vegetated. There's another dock that's at the border of my property, as well as what was a pump house at the head of the herring run that's now some kind of utility space for a different, not me, somebody else owns that. And then I'll send one more picture. This is basically the whole pond frontage of the property. And as you can see, it's pretty thick and heavy with vegetation. So what, at Skinnequit Pond, to make the bog, there was basically I guess a dike or berm pushed up against the pond. There was a license back over 100 years ago, approximately 100 years ago, to get a flume that would come through that. That flume is still there, but it's kind of broken down into a whole bunch of, boards, twisted boards. Water still comes through there when the water table goes up. So that's kind of where I'd like to be able to get through. It's already, the berm is already cut there. I'd like to be able to just access the pond and have the path terminate there, or roughly in that area.
Thank you. Amy?
So for the path itself, you're just gonna be a path in the dirt, correct?
Yes.
Nothing structural. I did mention potentially over some of the ditches in there, if you needed a board or two, I thought that was amenable if you needed it. That'll be up to you, but nothing structural. The property is very heavily vegetated between the tornado and storms and just honestly the briars that have climbed and pulled things down. It's correct, it kind of needs a little bit of TLC. And we kind of did the admin review as a trial last year. You made some headway, you're doing everything by hand, correct? And
And it's, the tick season kind of starts at the end of May, and then you're done until
Yeah.
things freeze up again. So that and poison ivy, it's not really a
Yeah.
fun project during the summer, so I haven't really been back there.
Yep. And you said, I mean, you're piling some of it, and some of it you're chipping, and I had mentioned, not heavily mulching on there, but if you were to lightly broadcast, that way other vegetation could come up. There is a lot of good vegetation in there. There's sweet pepper, some viburnum, some high bush blueberry that are just being choked out. Usually you don't see greenbrier being this aggressive. It doesn't usually completely outcompete, but it is doing that here. It really likes it. And then the raspberry bush as well. So this permit, the RDA would give, it wouldn't have to be, it's a big area. I didn't want to do it administratively again. It's more of a maintenance thing now rather than an annual permit. So a determination would be appropriate, and it would be a 4-foot wide path, and that 4 foot would be the width of the path to access the water as well. And Mr. Knight knows if he ever wants to do anything further, you'd obviously have to come back, but this would be a private path, not that there was talk or questions about whether it'd be public. It's not proposed to be public. So this is really just trying to take better care of a property that's gotten overgrown with invasives and allow you to use it a little bit and walk down there. So I would recommend.
Was one thing sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good.
One thing I forgot. So, as I mentioned, the property has been neglected over the years. AmeriCorps and Natural Resources does go in there. It's basically one day a year to try and make sure that herring run is clear. And there's a lot of work to get done in one day, and I'm not proposing as part of this to expand what they do, but that is something that's been done by the town, which is a positive, and hopefully it'll continue. So
I know they're planning on doing the Herring
Monday.
River Friday and Skinnecook, I think, Monday. And, we've volunteers from this board, myself, we've all been out. We're happy to help keep that clear. We did notice today when we were out there that, underneath where the run goes into the pond, might need to get dug out. That's not you. We'll discuss that with Heinz because there's a buildup of sediment there. So I'd recommend approval with a -2 determination because the work is actually in the resource area, but this work would not have an adverse impact.
Mayor, young lady there wanted to speak.
It usually after the commission does, but yeah, I'm sorry. No, you're good. You don't know. It's usually after myself and the commission speak that the chair will open it to public comments. So, but my recommendation is approval with a -2.
Good. Commissioner comments. Wayne?
No, I think fine.
Alan?
No comments.
Brad?
Good project. I've been out there, just confirming no real canopy cutting, no canopy producing native plants are gonna be cut, just the invasives.
not the canopy, correct?
Okay.
2 questions for you. That pump house you say is not yours?
So that was cut off in the last 20 years. This property has been kind of sliced and diced over the years and continued, got smaller, and then that pump house was hived off and
Yeah.
sold to somebody else, and what was remaining is.
Okay, because it looks like it's still on your land on this. Oh, I see, there's another, yeah, I see there's another
Depends
sort
on
of
which,
slice there
how
that
back-
takes
how
it
far
off,
back
yeah.
you go.
And then the other question I had for you real quick is, the trail that you're proposing to put in doesn't connect with your property? Are you gonna have a spur that comes off of that to somehow connect with your backyard?
I mean, it's accessible at this point.
No.
That was something that I was able to do last year's work on the Greenbriers around there, so. it's
Oh,
not
okay, that's the administrative review stuff that you got
Not really,
taken care of already. Yeah,
needed to
that's
be
fine.
figured out.
Okay, good. Yeah, I have no other questions. Any comments from the audience? Yes.
You would, if you
You
would
would
go up
step to the
this
microphone
corner.
and
Thank you.
introduce yourself, please.
We have to let everybody in virtual world let you know.
My name is Mary Lou Emond, and I live on Skinnequit Lane. And my concerns, first of all, it was language. It said a path around the property. Does that mean the perimeter of the property? And I also wonder how the wetlands are being addressed on this, because the herring run is there, and everyone is always concerned about the wetlands. So I'd like to know how that's addressed, and is it setting a precedent?
Do you want to tackle that, or you want me to?
Go ahead if you want to try.
So the removal of invasive plant vegetation, the vines, that's a tangle there, it would only improve the wetlands because it would actually allow for wetland species of plants to be able to grow better. Because the invasive vegetation that's there is suppressing the good stuff that is there. And then the run, the herring run itself, is maintained by the town and will continue to be maintained by the town. And you, Dean, correct me if I'm wrong, you said a path around, it's really a path through to allow you to access the water, not like a roundabout. I mean, if you want to walk on your property, you can walk on your property, but.
Correct. I mean,
It's
it's
sort of-
drawn on the map. It's pretty much, it's all, I mean, the herring run, I like to think of it going north and south, but it's not really. It goes a little bit west and then south and then heads back east. So it's on the west side of the herring run. As when we did the site visit a little over 2 weeks ago, if you tried to make the path on the east side of the herring run, it's fine for a while, and then you run into kind of a cliff where it falls, I don't know, probably 8 feet down into the herring run, and it's just not feasible. Then I have no way to get back unless I were to put something over right below the pump house. So I'm proposing to keep it on the other side.
So the path where he's proposed to put it really doesn't even impact the herring run at all? Doesn't connect with it,
No.
or you cross it, or anything like that?
That's correct.
It's not within the 100-foot line to be away from wetlands?
Well,
Those are my concerns.
Yeah.
That whole property is a
Structure being-
wetland, actually. It's not just the river.
It is, it's the cranberry bog,
Yeah.
too. So, and how is it to be addressed where the permit asks to have a path around the property? I take that as around the property, not a path through.
We could change the language to say through.
Can we share?
Well, I mean, the way I drew it is I'd like to be able to walk around the property. It's kind of an amoeba-shaped property, and it's a little over 4
Yeah.
acres, so
Within the property.
within the property, that would work.
But that's how I read it, and I was concerned about the wetlands. And is this setting a precedent also about people being able to come that close to wetlands? And Mr. Knight did say that he'd be using a chipper there also. So those are my questions,
Good, all right.
and
Um,
I do have a concern, but thank you all.
Well, thank you for expressing those. I think the application that we have before us is to determine whether or not we feel there would be any negative impact on the wetlands as a result of the proposal that has been presented to us. And that's essentially the charge that we have before us tonight. So I mean, Amy's assessment, she's been out there, she's looked at it. A couple of the commissioners went out today to also look at the property. And the assessment that we've reached is that the proposal essentially will have no negative impact. Again, it's private property. You're not going to have the same kind of traffic as you have in Bell's Neck or something like that going through it. So it should be relatively benign. Plus, as Amy has mentioned, the work that's being proposed to eliminate a lot of the invasives there will be ultimately positive for that area. Okay.
I don't know if you have anybody online.
Anybody on the phone that would like to make a comment? All right, hearing none, then can we have a motion, please?
Okay, I will move that we approve the request for determination of applicability with a -2 determination for the property located at 0 Deep Hole Road, map 17, parcel A1-64.
And can we have a second, please?
Second?
Seconded? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous, then.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you very
time.
much.
Thank you.
Thank
We'll have this out to you within a few days. Mm-hmm.
All right, next item on the agenda. A notice of intent for 280 Bank Street, map 32, parcel A2-5, a pool and a walkway. This is a continuation of a hearing that we held last week.
Mr. Chair, they've asked for a continuation until April 6th, as they have additional small revisions to add to the plan. So I would recommend you grant them that continuance.
All right, thank you. May I have a motion to continue this to April 6th?
Okay, I will move that we continue the hearing on the notice of intent for the property located at 280 Bank Street, map 32, parcel A2-5, until April 2nd, Amy?
6th.
6th, okay, until April 6th.
Thank you. It's been seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Motion passes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, notice of intent for 7 Sketchaconet Way, map 4, parcel C1-4 for proposed pier, ramp, float, and bank stabilization. Do we have a proponent?
Through the chair, Don Monroe from Coastal Engineering,
Okay, well,
representing the Coxes. Can you hear me?
yep, we can.
Okay. Would it be okay if I share my screen? Yeah.
Sure.
Second.
Okay, let's see if I can get this down. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is a dock that's being proposed at 7 Sketchaconet Way. It was presented a while ago to the commission, then was withdrawn to go back to the drawing board and come up with a few changes to the proposal. We made those changes trying to address some of the concerns the commission members at the time who viewed it had some current concerns about bank erosion and the stability of the bank. So we went back to the owners and came up with a slightly different design. We do meet, before I get into what we meet in terms of the dimensions, I'd like to show you the section view. We have land subject to coastal storm flowage. We have coastal bank, coastal beach, land under ocean, and land containing shellfish. We also went to the Waterways Committee and met with the harbor master and the shellfish warden, and the committee voted to support the project as proposed. We meet the following criteria. We're only 4 feet wide, which you can see in the plan view. It's a 4-foot wide proposed dock. We're not anywhere near the channel. As you can see here, we're over 87 feet from the deep water channel. We have a 1.5 to 1 height to width ratio. We're 6 feet above the mean high water line. which is shown right here, 7.5 on the deck. Mean high water at 1.5 gives us the 6 feet. We're less than 80 feet on the length, actually 44 feet from mean high water. We have 3 feet and greater depth at the end of the float, as well as the landward side of the float. We're around roughly 3 feet. We also are only proposing 160 square feet of float. There's no dredging proposed. We're over 25 feet from the property line. And it's going to be a shared dock between 7 Sketchaconnet and 9 Sketchaconnet. So there are some changes. The change that we made in terms of the coastal bank, you can see the existing grade right here, which is the dashed line. That is the current grade. It's rather steep right here, so we've proposed to cut this back. There's a blow up. In this area right here, we show the blow up of what we want to do for grading. That grading does mean that we'd have to remove vegetation. Amy did, in her comments, raise concerns about this particular proposal for stabilizing the bank, so we certainly want to discuss that through with the commission members. Although we do have an architectural managed planting plan that will be proposed by a person that does that work. We'll have her speak in a moment. We also did a shellfish survey. Pam Newbert's here to speak to that. So at this stage, I think because we also submitted an analysis of salt marsh in the area that's attached to the notice of intent. It also has some formulas addressing pile scour, particularly in the outer area here where these 2 piles will be. And other than that, since we meet most of the criteria, other than discussing the coastal bank, I'd like to turn it over to Pam Newbert at this stage to talk about the shellfish, and then our architect to talk about the planting, if that's okay through the chair.
Certainly, that's fine.
Okay, Dawn can everyone hear me? This is Pam Newbert here.
Yes, you're fine, Pam.
Okay, great, thank you. So I would like to briefly speak to the shellfish assessment. I've been to this site 3 times now. I've looked and done a shellfish survey, a full survey of the extent, as we usually do, with the 50-foot, with the transect down the center line of the pier. For the record, my name is Pamela Newbert. I have a PhD in marine science. I am a shellfish biologist and benthic ecologist. I appreciate the opportunity to present my results here from my 3rd survey. We consistently over the 3 surveys, we found the same shellfish abundances, which was not very much. We found 2 oysters. This habitat is such that there's a very high current that flows through the area naturally, and there is a very deep water depth where the dock, where the water-dependent structure is being proposed. So the structure meets the water requirements plus more. There's about 15 feet of water depth at the end of the proposed pier. And from a shellfish perspective, the sediment is coarse grain size. There's evidence of sand ripples from the current that comes in. And as Dawn mentioned, there's severe undercutting from the current of the coastal bank because the area is highly dynamic. So really the only shellfish that we have been able to find in the last 3 surveys that we did were 2 oysters and nothing else. It's not suitable habitat for quahogs. It's not suitable habitat for soft shell clams. It's just too much current that runs through there. And honestly, if there's a place for a pier, this would be an ideal, in my opinion, this would be the ideal place to put one because the habitat doesn't support a lot of shellfish. The habitat is highly dynamic and there is plenty of water depth for a vessel here. there's no salt marsh. The homeowner is willing to take on amending the coastal bank erosion and put in natural plantings. So I know it will be a late night for everyone here. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about this or my findings and discuss this. But I think that if there was given these circumstances, this is an ideal place to have a dock, honestly.
All right, thank you.
Yeah,
John?
through the chair, Ernie, will it be okay if our architect speaks to the planting plan?
Well, let me ask you a question, Don. Is this
Sure.
application, do you want to keep this as one application, or are you thinking perhaps that you want to have this split between the dock and the pier and then the bank restabilization?
I think we should go over it as it in the entirety, because if the commission's discussion about the grading of the bank is not palatable, then we would obviously make some changes, and we'd want to have that input and maybe include it in the whole package, in the whole presentation. So I would rather look at it that way, if it's okay with you.
That's fine. It's your presentation, sure.
Okay. So, do we have her on? I'm sorry, I forgot her name. Darn it. Hang on, maybe, hold on a second, Ernie, through the chair. Let me see if I can make sure she's on.
So you would come up,
Oh,
so.
Yeah.
Don, you're, she's right here with us.
Oh, good, okay.
Yeah.
Then you guys take over, how's that?
Great.
I'll mute.
Did you receive the landscape plan?
We did.
Okay.
Yep.
So I didn't bring it with me, and maybe Mark, could he share? his-
Sure. I'm happy to give you a copy if you want to sit at the table.
That'd be even better.
Is that better? You're welcome. Here you go.
Thank you.
Could you introduce yourself too,
Susan
please?
Sangiolo, resident 9 Sketchconnet Way, but also landscape architect.
Thank you.
So I know you all got to visit the site, and you could see that there are trees that were flagged to be removed. And for the most part, that was to allow for the regrading of the coastal bank. So there's 7 pitch pines that are either dead or in pretty bad shape. So we'd like to take those out. There's 6 northern red oaks that are in the area of regrading that would need to be removed, 2 amelanchier, and there's also 1 black locust, which is the only invasive non-native plant in the limit of work area. So those would come out, and then we've proposed to do some replacement with some red maples, some tupelos, try and replicate some of the canopy trees, but further back to keep it away from the regraded coastal bank. There would also be sort of stoloniferous shrubs and plant materials at the front, at the top of the coastal bank, so we have at least a 5-foot buffer of native shrubs, low bush blueberries, sweet fern, red twig dogwood, Fothered Gila. So we would stabilize that back edge of the slope, and then as you saw in the details, the fiber roll would be at the base of the regraded coastal bank, and we would plant that with American beach grass. And I know Amy would like to have a mix of other grasses in there, so that would be seeded behind it with a erosion control fabric and stabilize the slope area. So I think it's pretty much, that's pretty much it. It's I think it was, I'm not sure what the square footage was of replication, but it was basically a 3-to-1 mitigation proposed for what we were disturbing in the buffers, in the 50-foot buffer.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Don, go back to you. Do you have anything else you'd like to present?
Ernie, through the chair, thank you. No, I think that's our presentation. We really would like to get feedback from the commission members at this time, so that'd be great.
You can hold on to it for now.
All
if
right,
you need.
thanks very much. Amy, can we have your comment?
Sure, so I'll go through the project kind of like you did, piece by piece, and we'll start with the dock portion. So this did go to the Waterways Committee, and after some changes to the size of the float, it was originally proposed to be an 8 by 20, it was decreased to a 10 by 16. And I believe reorientated to alleviate some navigational concerns that the Harbor Master and Waterways Committee had. There are several ways the project does meet our requirements, and I shared all of this with Don Monroe, and hopefully it was shared with the applicants prior to the meeting. But, so the dock in the following ways meets our regulations. It's less than 80 feet in length. It's only proposed to be 36 feet beyond mean high water. The decking would be at least half-inch spacing. That's what we require right now. It would be desirable to go to 3/4 inch spacing. That's what we're putting forth at town meeting. Granted, there's no salt marsh there, but it does help, for shading if that is doable from the applicant. The float is less than 200 square feet. You proposed 160 square feet. The width of your decking is 4 feet. All the components of your dock are located more than 25 feet from the property lines and over 65 from adjacent structures, with the exception of some moorings, but again, that has been worked out with the harbor master. The landward edge of the float has about 3 feet of depth at mean low water and 10 or over at the seaward edge. We currently require 2.5, and the town meeting we were proposing 3, so this project meets that without the need for any dredging. The height is proposed 5 feet above mean high water, which is accordance with Chapter 91 of the state. When you're not going over salt marsh, it's a requirement of 1.25 to 1. Currently, the commission only requires 1 to 1, but we are moving towards that 1.25 to 1, hopefully at town meeting. Again, when you're not over salt marsh, which you're not here. Because of that, you don't need lateral access stairs, which means no additional disturbance to the coastal beach. Sorry. Again, no salt marsh in the vicinity of the dock. There were shellfish studies, produced little, which I'm not too surprised with, given the depth and velocity, like was stated. I know some sampling couldn't have been done at some of the deeper depths where you approach -13 to -16 feet. It's very deep. They are requesting a variance. They have in writing to working in a town and state map shellfish area. You touched upon it, Don, the seaward piles. I do think you'll get a little bit of pile scour there just because of the depth and the current. However, with no salt marsh, no eelgrass, and few shellfish, I mean, I'm not the shellfish biologist, I'll leave that up to those who are, but I don't see scours having a significant impact. I do question, above mean high water, the necessity of having a 15-foot long wooden walkway or whatever material, but a structural walkway with the 4-foot landing. I am curious, actually, I'll just ask it now, actually. Is it needed to have a walkway that long in order structurally for any way for stabilizing the dock, or is there a way, because it is a 0 to 50-foot buffer, could we decrease the length of that a little bit to have less structure but still have structural integrity to the dock?
Through the chair, do you want me to address that now, Amy, or?
Yeah, if you could, that would be good. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So I'll, first of all, yes, we can meet the 3/4 inch deck spacing. That's not a problem. We can do that. I would like maybe at this time, because of the structural question you have, it sounds like it's the 20-foot upper section, Amy, as you're talking about, that's on the, above the coastal bank? Because
Yeah,
the
it's,
lower section is definitely needed for stability.
It's the upper
Because of the depth of
section at
water.
the top of the bank going landward. It's the 15-foot, and then the 4-foot ramp. So
Yeah,
have to have the answer
Okay.
for it, but that's one of my questions is to, is it needed, because it's additional structure in the 0 to 50, and if we
Mhm.
can pare that down while still making sure your structure remains intact, that would, I would think, be beneficial.
sure. I think I'll take a chance right now and put Todd Turcott, my division manager, on the spot, because he's our structural engineer and very good at answering questions like that. And maybe there is some avenue to reduce it, but I'd have to really leave that up to him. Is it through the chairs, Todd? Yeah, thank you, Todd.
Yep. Thank you, Don. Amy, that's a good question, and we contemplated at cutting it in half and only doing the one pile with the proposed grade to reduce the erosion. Because what's happening right now is the dynamic nature of the river is scouring the bank there, and as it continues to erode, the vegetation, the larger trees fall in big chunks of coastal bank go away, and it accelerate the erosion rather than having a little bit cleaner vegetative area and a gentler slope will minimize the future erosion. So that's why we proposed the grade the way it was. That inner set of piles were presented and put in this submission for that continued future erosion that's going to be expected over time. So could we reduce it basically by half? I think it's shown as 20 feet in the cross section. Yes, we could, with the understanding that we would have to potentially come back if the coastal bank continued to erode to potentially add more piles in the future of that area and add to be able to access it from the coastal bank as it continues to erode without doing any hard structures, without doing any bulkheads or trying to propose anything like that. We took the input from the commission from a few years ago from when we listened to the hearings that this was a concern of the coastal bank erosion. And we wanted to try to address that in two facets. So that's our reasoning. Could we work with something different? Yes. But again, knowing that this is a dynamic area and the bulkhead to the north and the salt marsh to the south, with that current, accelerates some of this erosion along this bank in this area.
Thank you.
So, you're welcome.
So just to touch on the statement of this being a dynamic area, so there seems to be a little bit of contradiction in your application versus what you're saying. In the application, it alludes to, and you were provided aerials from 1938. Granted, they're just aerials, but you said this area has remained largely unchanged since then. But then yet you're saying, you have a dynamic eroding area. I'm not going to dispute that you have erosion going on there. Anybody can see that. But I think there's a little bit of a...
I understand what you're saying. In general, that whole salt marsh area has generally unchanged. This isolated small area between the salt marsh and the bulkhead that was installed on the neighbor's property to the north is causing some acceleration in this area. And once that bank with wave chop and other things that are occurring in there, when we have these odd little storms periodically, we get this acceleration. And now that we're getting into some larger vegetation off of the original coastal bank, those bigger trees, the pines, the oaks, they're falling into the river. And they're taking with that, when their root system falls over, they're taking large chunks. So it's gonna be more dynamic, and as the years go on. So yes, historically it's been pretty much the same, but we've got factors occurring now that are creating a dynamic nature in this small little pocket
Okay, thank you.
that we're observing.
I think it would be
And just for
helpful.
record, probably in the past 2 years since the original application, I want to say we lost about 3 to 4 feet of bank right there.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah, and it's also through the chair, it's a function of the wraparound that's happening as the current comes off of that bulkhead into this little lagoon. It's not a lagoon, but it is like seems, you might want to call it sheltered, but the erosion demonstrates that it's not really. So there's some extra energy that is being delivered to this part of the bank that we like to address with this application if possible.
Mhm. I understand. I just wanted to flesh that out. So getting into the kind of the work on the bank itself and in the 50-foot buffer. So in my review, that the work proposed with the fiber rolls and the plantings is not mitigation, because that's essentially a new project. Do the fiber rolls have to be done? No. Are the fiber rolls a soft solution? I would say yes. I do view them, talked with our coastal processes specialist from the county as well, and he says it's really up to the commissions to determine whether or not these types of structures are coastal engineered structures or not. And I would, because of the, it's a structure that's preventing, to some extent, a bank from acting in its natural way, eroding, preventing sediment getting to the downdrift beach, which you do have a small coastal beach just immediately at the toe here. I do view the proposal, because of the anchoring and the work that needs to go in and the fact that it is stopping sedimentation, that it is a coastal engineered structure. And so if the top of bank and the buffer zone was highly invaded with invasive species, and you wanted to do some of the work that you're proposing, I may not be as feel the way I feel about it. I understand the erosion that's happening. You can see the trees going in there, but this is not protecting a home. This is all native area up there. There's something to be said for letting natural processes be natural processes. And I think further, before I could recommend any type of soft structure or work here, I would want to see kind of a longer-term study of the actual erosion rates here, some benchmarks, things like that. And I want the applicant to demonstrate, that you're meeting these performance standards, especially as it pertains to erosion, providing sediment to a downdrift coastal beach. I'm curious over time if a bank will, as it erodes a lot of times, not all the times, but banks will meet their own natural angle of repose. I think your erosion that you've had in the last couple of years is more episodic. We don't know if it's a longer term trend or not. So I don't, well, and I appreciate the planting plan. That was a very nice plan that you came up with. It would enhance some diversity there, but you do have kind of a natural ecosystem that's been there for quite a while, that is serving a purpose there. So I would encourage you to think of, for the dock, I can recommend, with proper mitigation, we can talk about shellfish mitigation, or as this is a co-application with the projects, if there's area on the adjacent property of doing some mitigation planting, we can talk about that. But with proper mitigation, I could support the dock, but at the time I can't support the work on the bank and the buffer.
Through the chair, can I just address a couple of the comments and questions that Amy had, and maybe ask a question of Amy? So I understand what you're saying about it being a quote unquote engineered structure, being the fiber rolls. The reason for the fiber rolls, they're actually biodegradable, which we could actually reduce the durability of them so that they erode faster, is really just to help stabilize that lower beach grass, to help that more so than anything, rather than just doing a a resloping of it and planting beach grass in that area. It was more to give it some substance for the first year to 2 years to let it develop. So that was the reasoning for it. The other thought, we understood your comments and we appreciated the comments in regard to the extent of what we were asking for in this coastal, the slope stability work. One option is if we let it go naturally, which we don't really have a problem with, but that was a concern expressed a couple years ago that we tried to address. If we at least design the dock to deal with some of the future erosion, with that ability to monitor over time to say, watch that erosion that occurs naturally, but help clear just some of the bigger trees right along the existing scarp so that they don't have big, expansive erosion. Would that be something that would be more palatable than was presented?
I would say I'd be happy to meet out there and look at those trees, because there are some that are immediately overhanging, and if we were to flush cut that, they're gonna go, put it that way. If you flush cut them ahead of time so they can't take the rest of the bank with them, I think that is something that I'd be willing to look at. I'm all set, thank you. Those were my comments.
Okay, good. Comments from the commissioners? Wayne, do you want to start off? Alan?
No comment.
Jim?
Well, the only question that I had was that, according to what I saw in my package, the Shellfish Survey was done in 2019, because what I saw was the report that we have was dated November 6, 2019.
The original.
Okay.
Shellfish, Pam on?
There should be another 2021 in
Yeah,
there.
there,
Okay, well then maybe I just didn't get that, the 20, so the most
It is in
recent.
Dropbox. It should be in there too. We can make
Okay.
sure.
Okay, but, so there was one done in 2021? Okay, that answers my question, thank you.
sure.
Brad?
Okay, I've got a few. I guess I'll start with the Shellfish Surveys. So a question for Pam, I think, on, do you know if the surveys were conducted at low tide or any particular tide?
They were conducted near low tide. We time our surveys around the falling tide. We usually get there about an hour to an hour and a half before the actual time of the lowest of the low tide. And then we do our surveys and we work the falling tide, especially in this area because it's so deep.
Okay.
So yes, it's done in and around low tide.
All right, thank you. So I expressed this concern the last time this hearing was before us, that the survey did not pick up any soft shell clams. And there is a band of soft shell clams present that it's not very long or wide, but it's exposed at low tide. And it looks like you had a few transects that came across there. So I'm just curious, were there plots dug along that sand, as it slopes down towards the water level?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
We did not find any soft shell clams, and I know that you had brought this up the last time,
Yeah.
Brad, about this, but the sediment was very coarse, and we did dig down with the rake that we have that has the extra long tines. We try to dig down to a foot, in depth at every location. Sometimes we hit hard rock, cobble. It's 6 inches down, but the area was very well scoured when we were there. Even if there are soft shell clams, it would be difficult living for them, as juveniles or larvae, because it's not a place where they would easily set. And two, even if the pier goes in, it would bridge over it would bridge over that shallow, very near shore area. And the area where the boat would be is in very deep water.
Right. Well, it is a reoccurring concern I have. These surveys just seem to underreport soft shell clams. They're there. I was there this afternoon. It's very clear to see them once the tide goes down and the holes are exposed. And so to me,
did you find soft shell clams? I mean, I didn't see a report from you or any results from you. Sometimes those holes are not soft shells, they're sipunculates.
right, yeah, I dug some, but, you know, of course, I'm not conducting a survey. I'm looking at holes and I'm digging to confirm they're soft shell clams. So I don't want to confuse things by saying I found 6 soft shell clams, but they're there. They've been there every time I've gone. It was formerly a place that was dug because there were high densities, but the occurrence has declined throughout Herring River, so the numbers are down. But that's a flat that, coarse sand is actually very good for soft shell clams, and so I think what happens is there's so much erosion from the bank that it really covers the slope, and it isn't good for cohogs until you get into the deep bottom of the channel, and then you'll find a lot of cohogs once you get out into the mid-channel. But they're not surviving very well in that slope because it's so dynamic. So either way, I just wanted to make that point that I have those concerns. It is, to me, shellfish habitat and soft shell clams are present. But moving on, I think my bigger concern for this project is really the coastal bank. I think what's positive here is that it's a shared proposal. I think it's the first shared proposal I've seen before the commission in my time here, and I think also there's no salt marsh impacts. So there are favorable things, but I do think, and I expressed this last hearing, it's a very natural and functional coastal bank providing sand to the system. It's a very natural buffer zone in the 0 to 50. So I'm very concerned about this proposal as to what it proposed to do on top of the bank. And I just think it's going to lead to more and more exposure to that bank. And I can't help but think that a structure at this location will exacerbate the erosional forces that are already occurring, and they're clearly impacted by the bulkhead just upstream. So it'll be another structure that'll increase the erosional forces, and I just don't think it's a good idea for this location for that reason. So, yeah, I think those are the two factors. It is in fact shellfish habitat, and I think this project would result in substantial impacts to the coastal bank.
I'm sorry, is there a
I
comment?
will have to add, if I can add, the coastal bank is already affected. It's already erosional. I do not think that adding this, and Todd, you would better speak to this, but in my opinion, from the perspective of shellfish habitat, a water-dependent structure here, given the depth and the location, would not have any significant effect to shellfish habitat in this area. Todd, I'm not, you can talk more about the engineering.
Yeah, no, I thank you, Pam. No, I through the chair, I agree that this additional couple of piles is not going to exacerbate the erosion that's occurring in this area. It's not going to. The scour, we provided calculations. We provided engineering calculations in our report on our salt marsh assessment for the Herring River, which we provided as part of this application. Scour occurs around piles with current flow and water depth. And that is a limited extent of exposure around a given pile based on diameter of pile in the documents that were provided. The other comment about it being a shellfish area and there being concerns, we've had direct conversations, and I believe we're going to be receiving a supporting letter from the Shellfish Constable, Heinz Prof, that while there is a shellfish habitat, these docks do not affect the shellfish. And actually, we've, in our report, also provide that the increase of shellfish habitat for oysters and other things and other species actually improves it with those piles because they have something to hang on to. So I understand Brad's concerns in this area, but a piled supported structure is not going to change the erosion of the coastal bank.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that?
Yeah, sure, please.
Yeah, so to follow up on your point with the Herring River Salt Marsh Impact Report from February 28th, 2022, you've got a figure 2, which is cited from a Florida reference. Can you describe how velocity factors into those calculations?
I unfortunately don't have it in front of me, but velocity is a factor of based on the current, and that's just one of the examples of it. Don, I believe it was provided in a supplemental. I'm not sure if it was in the original, or is it? You pulling it up, Don?
Hold on. Through the chair, Brad, which photo was it, so I can try to pull it up?
On the third page, it's a figure 3-1 and 3-3, which is grabbed from a reference at the Florida Department of Transportation.
Right here. Yep. It's on the screen now, Todd.
Thank you. Yep. So that's just one of the components in the analysis. That's the scour depth based on diameter. That's an empirical based on studies done. That there's further equations that we can provide all kinds of different engineering equations. This has been studied by the American Society of Civil Engineers when we designed pile-supported bridges through rivers. There's several of them through the Herring River. This has all been documented. It's roughly 1.5 times the diameter of the pile, the effect on the lateral scour from that area based on velocity and current.
Can you point out where velocity?
Through the chair.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brad.
I was going to say, I can't tell where velocity, I don't see a variable of velocity in that equilibrium.
It's not a variable in there. That's correct. That's an empirical based on many studies that were done that velocity had some impact. And we can provide, if you want us to provide a specific exact calculation for this with the current that we have in the Herring River, we can do that.
I think it's an outstanding question because I think I'm seeing scouring impacts, and of course, there's other factors. There's shading. There's discussion recently of crabs. I'm seeing impacts, and so I think it's very important we try to dig it.
I'm sorry, Brad, what are the impacts on what in this instance for this dock that has no salt marsh on it?
It would be, well, what I'm hearing from you is there's no scouring potential. And so I'm looking at this figure and I can't derive that conclusion from this figure.
I will provide a specific calculation for you from an engineering basis for this particular site with the current that we have in the water depths in this area for those piles.
So I guess my point is, you're correct about the salt marsh, and that's really a favorable aspect of this site, but you've got 4 pilings on the present bank. I just can't imagine that's not going to exacerbate what's already happening there naturally, which is a natural process, which is okay, but I just can't imagine those 4 pilings won't cause those forces to increase.
It also has to do with depth, Brad. It's not just that the fact that they're on the coastal bank. If you don't have any water there, but it's a storm surge or a splash from a wave that's causing the erosion, it's not additional scour. So, there's many aspects to it. And yes, as the river continues to expand and be dynamic, those factors are going to change. Can we analyze and design for every factor? We don't know the time frame when it's going to happen.
Yeah, I know sea level rise it's happening, and it's something that it's really hard to put into this equation. But it's a natural, functional coastal bank and buffer zone presently.
And it's going to continue that way.
Yeah, well, I'm concerned. I mean, downstream, we had a project that came in at 10 Chase Street, and there was dramatic alterations to the coastal bank. It's just natural for properties to want to clear this area and open these areas up. And I'm really concerned about that potential.
You'd have to ask the chairman.
Mr.
Yes.
Chair?
Yes.
I have a question. If you feel as though the solution here is to let this erode as it does naturally, we've been there since 2016, and I can tell you that it's coming closer to the salt marsh. So if we allow this to continue with no mitigation, no repair to the coastal bank, the scour is continuing down towards the salt marsh area. I don't understand how we're so concerned about pilings, but not the effect that this bulkhead's having on this coastal bank that's continuing down downriver.
Right,
And so the solution is to do nothing?
Well, here's my concern, that southern salt marsh is what you're referring to.
Correct.
And it's getting a little bit of pressure right now. I look at 4 pilings where they're placed, I don't know how that erosional pressure wouldn't increase.
Through the chair, I gotta speak to that. Through the chair, excuse me, let's get this straight here. First of all, we have a vertical faced bulkhead that's causing issues. And you're comparing that kind of scour and that kind of erosion to 4 pilings that amount to about four square feet. And that 4 square feet is not parallel to the shore. It's perpendicular. So to think that 4 piles are going to have an adverse effect to the salt marsh, but not address the erosional factor that's taking place as a result of the wave from the bulkhead, which is depositing sand over onto the salt marsh and probably smothering it ever so slightly, I'm lost. The piles are not going to add to this. As a matter of fact, they will have, like Todd said, there's an Army Corps manual we can send to you that you can see that the expert on pile scour for the Army Corps wrote that there's a rule of thumb that the amount of scour around a pile in a estuary is roughly 1.5 times the pile diameter. That is nowhere near the salt marsh, Brad. It's not going to be the piles that's the issue in this location. It's going to be continued wraparound erosion from the bulkhead to the north. And so this is an effort for these people to protect their property in light of the fact that the bulkhead was approved sometime in the past. But the piles, Brad, come on, it's only 4 square feet. It's not going to have an effect. And I understand your concern, but I also understand that you're making comparisons that don't make common sense. And that's just hard to understand when we provide you with calculations and Army Corps manuals that study this. And then you've got on the ground information that shows you that it's the vertical face bulkhead and those kinds of structures that cause this problem, not round piles that amount to 1/10 of 100% of the surface area that we're talking about.
Let me just interject my thoughts if I can on this one, Brad. We've had a number of similar applications in recent months, I think. One on North Road, one right across the street from that on Salt Meadow Lane. And in both of those applications, I think we came to the conclusion that there was some disagreement perhaps between the applicants and certainly some of the commissioners. And in both situations, what we did was we called in Greg Berman to provide an assessment for us on, number one, what the impact, the location up on Salt Meadow Lane, for those of you that are aware of it, it's on the opposite, it's on the east side of the river. It's, again, a coastal bank that is showing some severe erosion, and it's under, the river is actually undercutting the coastal bank. I think Greg said he could see about 3 feet underneath the bank where the river has eroded it. Greg's initial reaction was that's not necessarily bad. He said eventually it will undercut it, the bank will fall down and create a new natural slope for the river, and it would lessen the impact of the erosion going forward. I'm not an expert on that. I think that given the concerns with this particular area, and again, there's an additional aggravating factor being that northern bulkhead. But I would like to see having Greg come in, do an assessment of this particular area as well, and give us his report on it as to what he feels the best solution would be. Either a soft solution, revetment, whatever, but maybe nothing at all. But I'm unwilling to make any sort of a determination, I think, at this point, without having that kind of expertise take a look at it. Did you have other questions, Brad?
No, I think that covered it.
So Greg is a coastal processing specialist with the county. He's a free resource. He's a third party, he's a consultant. So with your permission.
Absolutely.
I wanted to come to this meeting first, 'cause I thought we might go there.
Yeah.
But I can ask Greg out and let you, of course, know when he's gonna be there, with me and, the commission too.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, may I have a word?
Sure.
Mark Sangiolo. Who, can you describe before we agree to this, who's Greg?
Greg is a coastal
And-
processes specialist employed by Barnstable County. He's a coastal geologist. He's from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute and Barnstable County Cooperative Extension. So he's a free resource. He is a third party, he has no stake in the game, if you will.
You pay him?
Amy, if I might chime in to just support this.
Town of Harwich
As
pays
coastal-
him?
From coastal standpoint, Greg's reviewed many of our projects before. He's been on, helped commissioners, evaluate projects, and we've worked through and come up with great solutions. So I think that's a wonderful
Fine.
approach.
Sounds like he's got a good CV. The town of Harwich pays him?
We don't pay, nobody pays him. He's a free resource.
He-
He's paid by the county.
He's on retainer? So he's going to say the same thing, that it's going to go to its natural repose.
He
So
may
the
or may
question
not.
is, the common sense question is, do you want to dump the sand in the river, or do you want to remove it to its natural repose and try to protect future erosion? Could somebody give me an idea where the commission stands on that?
I'm
No,
not
I don't
prepared
think
to
we
do
are able to.
You don't know whether you'd rather dump it in the river or have it removed?
Through the chair, Ernie, let me help out with that one. I've worked with,
I'd rather have the commission answer it.
well, right now, Greg Berman is the best choice that we have, sir. And
I'm not asking about Greg or anyone else. All I'm saying is, would you rather the river wash the bank to its natural repose into the river, or would you rather have it removed to its natural repose?
I don't think we're in a position to answer that at this point.
Oh,
I'm not willing to.
it's a philosophical question, that's all.
That's fine. Leave it at that.
No, I mean like an answer.
Well, I have a couple other questions for you that I'd like to move on to, if you don't mind. The other question I had with respect to the dock design, is there a reason that you've decided to use the green heart piles as opposed to a monopile construction or design that we've seen more recently on docks that we've approved?
I'll answer that, sure. We've talked about the current flow in this area, the dynamic nature of this. A monopile design in this water depth is not advisable with ice flows and other things. From an engineering standpoint, a double pile system is required.
Okay, all right, good, thank you. Then that answers the other question that I had as well, then, I think. All right, so where do we stand on this? Where would you like us to go next, Don?
I think Don's muted. Maybe I can answer. Asking Greg's opinion to help the commission to continue it to a further discussion, because I think we'll get to the end of the result with Greg's input. I think and I'll take the lead on this. When we came up with this slope stabilization, shoreline stabilization, it was based on comments from a couple years ago that we read from and heard from the previous hearings, that we were trying to help mitigate those issues, those concerns by bringing the coastal bank to its natural repose sooner rather than later. We're not against leaving it alone and letting it erode to its natural position, as long as we design the dock accordingly and take out some of the larger trees that would naturally fall in and cause more issues. So I think getting Greg's input, he might come to that same conclusion, and I think as a design team, we would be happy with that.
All right, thank you. Amy, then, as far as arranging for Greg to get in here, you'll schedule that and coordinate it with the property owners?
Yep, it usually is a week or two before Greg can come out. I'll contact him tomorrow. So in the meantime, I mean, I would recommend you go for a continuance for about a month, into our second meeting in April, just to give him time to come out and then do his report. And some of the, we have a couple of the outstanding questions that you can look at, in terms of, my questions were about the mitigation aspects and that. And then you have a couple other, items to address. But, yeah, I think a month, and that's up to your team as well. I think 2 weeks is too soon. We couldn't get everything lined up, with Greg and within 2 weeks. So my recommendation would be if you were to continue to April 20th.
2 weeks is enough for Greg, you think? I mean,
April
we're still
20th.
waiting on Salt Meadow.
We just got it.
Oh, we do, good,
Yep,
okay.
I have to review it and finalize, but yeah.
Okay,
So April 20th, April 6th is our next meeting. I think that's too soon.
all right.
What do you think?
And I assume that's agreeable with opponents?
I think it's realistic.
Yes, we'd like to have time to review Greg's report. I'm assuming, Amy, we would get that opportunity.
Yep, so when he sends it, so what he does is he drafts it, I get it. I mean, I have no say in what he puts in it, and then he finalizes it and he sends it to you as well.
Yep, thank you.
Yep.
Okay,
Thank you.
so can we have a motion then to move the hearing to, what was the next date of the meeting?
April 20th.
April 20th.
April 20th.
Okay, I'll move that we continue the hearing on the notice of intent for excuse me, I'll probably pronounce this wrong, Sketchiconic Way, map 4, parcel C1-4, to the meeting of April 20th, 2022.
May we have a second, please?
Second.
Seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes then.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you.
If I could just explain, Sketchiconic means the east side of the Herring River.
Okay,
That's
thank
how-
you.
That's how it was.
Now we know.
Yeah.
Now we know, and hopefully next time I'll
There you
pronounce
go.
it correctly.
Or you can just call it the east side of the Herring River.
That's much easier.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Next item on the agenda is a notice of intent for 14 Mill Pond Road, map 1, parcel J1-94 for proposed pier, ramp, float, and dredging.
Through the chair, Don Monroe again, representing Don Anino, the applicant. This is a project that you have seen in the past. We went back to the owner and came up with some changes to the design. We did go through Waterways Committee and Harbor Master and Shellfish Constable, and again, it was supportive of the project as proposed. We are proposing some dredging. You can see that dredging that's in the section view right in this location here to gain the 3-foot depth. There was soil testing done as well as an analysis of the soil during the Shellfish Survey. Those soil tests came back showing that this location where the dredging is proposed, which is in the plan view, this location right in here is anoxic mud. We feel that if we can remove that anoxic mud, we'll better the habitat. So that's why we're proposing the dredging. It's less than 100 cubic yards of material, but as I said, it's not really great material for the benthic habitat. The review by Amy, I'll just go through quickly the items that we meet under the regulations. We're 4 foot in width. We don't impede on the navigable channel. We're at a 1.5 to 1 height to width ratio. We definitely can make the 1/2 inch deck spacing to 3/4. We're not dredging within 25 feet of the salt marsh. We are greater than 65 feet to any neighboring docks, so 25 feet from the property line. As I said, it went through Waterways. John Rendon and Heinz chimed in that they don't see any problem with this proposal. We are going less than 200 square feet on the float. There was a type of a Scribner error, I want to call it, that the 80.0 feet is what we have for a dimension to mean high water. The waterways plan showed 80.8, but I think that was more an error in drafting than anything else, because it is purposely proposed to be 80 feet, governed by the fact that we're dredging and trying to stay 25 feet away from the salt marsh with the dredging. So we want to show that we're actually meeting the criteria that's required. We do recognize Amy's comment about the herring, the fish run. Although it is a fish run, apologize for it not being indicated on the form. We'll change that page 19 through the process of the hearing. I'm sure we'll be looking at more than one hearing with this particular project. Let's see. With the dredging, we do meet the depth, but Amy's correct. Without it, we don't at the low water mark. We have requested variance because it is a shellfish area. Heinz Prof made that known at the Waterways Committee meeting. We will and have been drafting up responses to the performance standards under Riverfront. We'll submit those to Amy as soon as we complete those within the next few days. We would be looking at more than likely doing some kind of shellfish mitigation. We'd look for input from Amy on that. And as far as the landward extent of the pier to from mean high water, we can discuss that. Todd's with us, so he can address any structural implications to that. And there was another shellfish survey done, so that it's more updated than the older one, but that gives us a perspective from one survey to the next, and Dan can speak to that. We are proposing a monopile design to try to minimize the number of piles that's called out in this section right here. The monopile is, because it's a shallower area and because it's salt marsh, we can use monopiles in this location. I would like to just make a comment before many of the questions come about the destruction of salt marsh. We've done this kind of installation many times in the past. I think you're familiar with some of the other projects along Herring River that Wilkinson Ecological helped us on a number of years ago. There's a method that Seth has demonstrated does not destroy the salt marsh to install a pile where a sharp spade shovel is used to poke through the peat of the salt marsh, spread it apart, introduce the pile, so that the pile is below the peat that could be affected by a flat pile driving salt marsh down through the hole. So we actually open up the salt marsh and then press the salt marsh back around the pile. So the pile is taking up salt marsh area to the tune of roughly a square foot per pile if it's 12-inch diameter, but it does not destroy the salt marsh because we aren't going to drive the pile right into the salt marsh without actually making a way for the pile to get through the salt marsh without damage. I just want to make sure that people understood that before we moved forward with questions. This has been a proven method that shows the salt marsh does not get destroyed. The scour that has been raised a number of times, we can provide calculations. Todd can speak to that. And I think I'd like to, at this point, turn it over to Pam to talk to the Shellfish Report, if that's okay through the chair.
Sure.
Hi, everyone. This is Pam Newbert again for representing the Shellfish Habitat Assessment that was performed. I did 3 habitat assessments over the last 3 years at this location. And in order to keep this meeting brief, I'll quickly summarize that the results that I found at this location are remarkably consistent. So, you want to see a study of 3 years of shellfish study effort. This is a good example. There are there are shellfish here, there are oysters in the nearshore environment. Docks and piers do not affect oysters. In fact, oysters can live and cohabitate with the docks and pier pilings. There are cohogs. We did find Mercenaria in the shallow subtidal water, but as Don mentioned, and I can verify through our inspection of the sediment, visual inspection of the sediment, it was anoxic. It had that high, that very sulfitic smell when you take a sample. It was black and very loose. This is obviously a very different site than what we just discussed for Mr. Cox. It's much more quiescent. The sediment is much finer and has a high organic content to it. So it was anoxic. I support the dredging of this material. There weren't many cohogs, but they were there. The cohogs can be removed before the dredging takes place, or mitigation can take place with some seeding after the dredging has taken place. It's a very small amount of dredging that's being proposed. And I think that the benefit here is that you will be removing anoxic mud that is high in organic content, similar to the dredging that's been done in Allen Harbor or in Allen's Harbor and in Witchmere Harbor. Removing this black anoxic mud creates habitat that is better for shellfish. It's oxidized. It's a grain size that's more favorably that is more favored for shellfish, and I think that there can be benefits to overall water quality with improvements in the Herring River through the removal of this black anoxic mud. So I'm happy to answer questions. I know that there'll be questions, and I'll leave it at that. And you let me know what questions you have, and I will answer them as best I can.
Thank you. Don, do you have more?
At this stage, I think we're set for questions, and if there's anything that we can answer, we'll do the best. And Todd's here. If we have questions structurally, we can answer those too. So,
All right, thank you. Amy, do you have comments on this?
Sure. Just today, this afternoon, we got comments from Division of Marine Fisheries. You folks online should have as well. But I thought, just because the commissioners haven't had a chance to review it, because we just got it today, that I would quickly go over what they had said in their letter. Basically reiterated the scope of the project with a pier with a minimum of 6-foot clearance between the stringers and the salt marsh, improvement dredging of 86 cubic yards to ensure the float maintains a 30-inch clearance. Dredge footprint will be 25 feet from the salt marsh. So they noted the site lies within mapped shellfish habitat for quahog, softshell clam, and is downstream of a mapped shellfish habitat for bay scallop and American oyster. Subtidal waters have habitat characteristics for these species. They noted the AECOM September 19th, 2019 study, shellfish study. Let's see. Mentions that the project overlies the salt marsh and that 3 piles would be sited within the salt marsh, and noted the importance of the salt marsh for a variety of ecosystems, habitat, and fish and invertebrate species. Herring River is a diadromous fish passage for alewife, blueback herring, eel, and white perch. Also winter flounder spawning. So they have offered they suggest a time of year restriction for any silt producing activities from January 15th to June 30th, and that any activities requiring a barge should be coordinated so the barge avoids grounding. So that the commission now has that in your Dropbox, but we just got that late today. Well, Don, you went through a lot of my points, so I'm going to keep it brief. a lot of what Don said was kind of a list that the commission has that I went through about where the project meets and where we question it. So I kind of figured the 80.8 was a Scribner error, but I just wanted to make sure. I do have some concern about impacts to salt marsh. Certainly improving spacing for the decking and shading will help, and the height is good, 6 feet over, but I still have some concerns about that. It is within town mapped habitat. I know that we had some conversations about that and that variance, and I'll let you speak to that if you want to, Don, in a minute. Would be interested in seeing shellfish mitigation as well as mitigation. We've been requiring since 2020 a mitigation for new structures in resource areas in the amount of 4 to 1, and in the 0 to 50 of 3 to 1. I think all of this is technically resource area because I think you're below the top of coastal bank, even with your walkway. This is another kind of splitting hairs, but I just want to get it right. The plan says the pilings will be pressure treated, which we don't prohibit that, but in the narrative, you do state on various pages it's going to be non-leaching timber, and I'm just curious which one it is, just for clarity. My other point is, does it need to extend so far above mean high water? I understand that with climate change, you might want to have it not end right at the edge of the marsh, but I think we could reach a happier medium about where that landing should be, rather than at that top of the slope there. Pam, you had mentioned your shellfish studies, so I have 2019 and 2020. Did you say there was another one or no?
I did, there was 2019, there was 2020, and then there was a 2021 survey.
Okay, I didn't see that, but honestly, I may have missed it. Things have happened before. But I'll look for it and go ahead.
Maybe if I could just jump in. I emailed Pam's survey when I sent you an email about a week ago. So it was separate from the NOI, but you probably should have it. I think I sent Cox's around the same time.
No problem. I will check that, Michelle. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Where the dock itself would be in the sediments range from sandy mud to sand to salt marsh. Where the dredging is proposed is kind of a mix of sandy mud and some anoxic materials. One point that I feel like I should make is, and maybe it's something the commission really needs to clarify on their shellfish surveys going on. While it's important, I think, to look at what's in the salt marsh, I mean, we don't dig in it, and we shouldn't be digging in the salt marsh, but to use those plots as part of the total number of plots of doing the shellfish study, I don't know how that stays consistent, because if you don't physically sample for shellfish in the salt marsh, but then you use those plots in the marsh and compare them to the plots you actually dug that are seaward, I don't know what that does to your sampling, your concentrations, if you will, of shellfish. So that may be something the commission may want to talk about in the future, in what they want to see for shellfish studies. I understand, why you put it there. So, kind of with that, I kind of just hope we can have a productive discussion on this. Those are my comments.
All right, thank you. Let's start, Brad, do you want to start off on this?
Sure, I'll follow right up on Amy's comments, because I had that same question on the Shellfish Survey. So I have two, one from 2019, which I've seen before, and then one from 2020. And they were very consistent in terms of finding cohogs. And I haven't seen any soft shell clams there. There's a lot of oysters there right now.
Yeah.
There's a tremendous set this year in the Herring River. I don't know why. But again, I think we all agree that the concerns with structures like this are not so much oysters, but more the other species. But my question to follow up on Amy's is, so I guess in 2019, it lists 130 plots, and I count 110. But then it's not clear how many of those were actually sampled. Could you clarify that for us, Pam?
Yes, all of those locations in 2019 were sampled. We always, as I mentioned before, we go in about an hour to sometimes 2 hours, depending on the location, to sample on the falling tide. And we do the deeper parts when the tide is the lowest. So we'll start at the exposed areas where we dig, and then we'll work the falling tide, and then and if needed, we'll work the rising tide, but we'll get the deepest samples done at the lowest point of the tide. And we try to time our tides on the spring tides when the lows are extra low, which doesn't always make our clients happy because we have to postpone our surveys to later in the month or to coordinate around the moon cycle. But that's what we do because we want to get the best data. You know, we're doing this to obtain shellfish habitat assessment data. We are looking for shellfish, so in the habitat that they prefer. So we will delay surveys to meet or to have the best tide cycle so that we can sample the most number of locations.
Okay.
And that was the same for the 2021 survey. We did the same exact survey footprint. We set the center line based on what CEC gave us, and then we set transects every 10 feet out to 50 feet on either side of the center line. And then we set transects that went out to every 10 feet to extend 20 feet beyond the seaward most extent of where the dock would be placed.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at a very large area for a project that is only a fraction of the size of the area that we sample. And in fact, our samples went so far over that we went to the neighboring pier that exists already, where that dock sits on the seafloor, and we found shellfish underneath the existing float that is sitting on the bottom.
Yeah, looking at the map, I don't see that. It looks like your grid is well separated from that dock.
Maybe it's a
Well,
2021 survey, which
maybe you should look at the 2021
Okay.
report.
All right.
That's my error. I'm sorry, I
Right,
didn't
so I don't have that.
get that.
But I guess Amy made a point about sampling the salt marsh. I guess I am concerned about that. So you actually dug plots in the salt marsh?
No, we do not. We never dig plots in salt marsh, and we never dig plots in eelgrass habitat. Now, as you know, Brad, there are no quahogs or softshell clams that live within the well-established rooted system of a salt marsh habitat. It's habitat, yes, and there may be some ribbed mussels associated with the edge of the salt marsh habitat, but we would never, ever dig up salt marsh habitat to look for shellfish that we know are not present there.
Yep. Now, this is all
It serves a
helpful.
different purpose.
Yep. It's helpful for us to think about this because, you're going to see oysters in the salt marsh. So you'll get oysters when you have, there's like 40 different plots in the salt marsh. So that would be oysters. And then in the plots that have quahogs, it's almost like a different strata. And so I wonder if going forward we want to think about that, because if you look at the frequency of occurrence of quahogs here, for all the plots, I'd call it moderate to low. But if you look at the frequency of occurrence for quahogs in just the plots that is quahog habitat, then I'd call it moderate. So, I think it's important. All the information's there. The surveys provide that, but it's important for us to look at this and think about it in that way. Because
I want to add, Brad, that and not to interrupt you, but if we saw oysters in the salt marsh, we would identify them and put them in our grid. Our job is to find shellfish.
Yep.
And if we documented the oysters that were along the edge of the salt marsh, but we did not see, as we walked, carefully, we walked very carefully along paths when they're available on sandy parts. And let me tell you that the mud out where we were sampling was that boot sucking mud that makes it very dangerous to actually be taking samples. But, fortunately we have equipment and there's always two of us out there, and if we need to, we tie lines to each other, because that, as you know, that stuff can be like quicksand and it just sucks you in when it's very high in organics and very silty and soft. So we are very careful about that. And I would always mark oysters if they were up in the marsh, and we didn't see any up in the higher marsh areas. We saw them all towards the edge, and yes, they're there. And as you said, piers and docks and oysters can coexist.
Mm-hmm. Yep, thank you.
And if I could just jump in
Sorry?
I could just jump in for 1 minute.
Sure.
The commission doesn't have the recent shellfish report. I was wondering, I don't know, Pam, if you have it, if you're able to share,
Dawn,
she's able to share the screen.
Dawn had it. I think Dawn had it. I can't share my screen because I'm only on my cell phone here with this call, so I can't share my screen. But Dawn has it available and can share his screen. He just had it. I think.
No, I don't think I have the 2021. I have the 20.
Well, because we're.
Don, I can email it to you, right?
I think it's fine to wait.
That's fine.
Go ahead.
Just if it's helpful to the commission.
I think it'd be hard for us to see it so far away on the screen now anyways, and again, I apologize. I think it would be better I'll get it to the commission tomorrow. If we're gonna be, continuing the hearing anyway for a couple of things to be fleshed out, I think it's just better if they see it right in front of them, so.
Okay, makes sense.
All right, thank you, and I apologize for being a little nitpicky here, but it's really important, I think, because these numbers give us guidance on how we view this shellfish habitat. And we have a bylaw that says that we're not supposed to put new structures in shellfish habitat without a variance, and so we have to decide at what point the shellfish habitat is important, is worthy of a variance, and would it be impacted by the structure. So it is pretty important to zero in on these numbers, and I think that thinking about separating the salt marsh samples from the quahog habitat samples is valuable to me. So, also, Pam, if you could look up in the 2020 report and just confirm whether it was 130 samples or 110. That's not clear to me right now.
I will confirm that.
Okay.
And send that to Dawn. But it was whether it's 130 or 110, it's a lot of samples, Brad.
Oh, I know. It does change that. What I look at is density and frequency of occurrence. And so it's important, we've got data on all these past surveys over the years, and it's helpful to compare this and try to understand, is it low densities, is it moderate, is it high? And I think this one is probably low to moderate, and it depends on the data. So anyways, you all know my concerns about. Sorry?
I have one more comment to add, in that the maps that the town provides for shellfish habitat are not exactly clear to me. And in my report for 2021, you'll see that I say that the area is not in town mapped habitat because the property is between two locations. There's a space between two locations that are marked as shellfish habitat. It's very confusing, and so I don't want you to I want you to understand why I said what I said is because the town's maps are challenging to interpret at this point in time, and I know that you're working on them to make them more understandable, but the property is between two areas that were marked as habitat for quahogs. And if you look north of the bridge, there's a similar kind of gap where the habitat is marked for quahogs, and then there's a big gap, and then it's marked for oysters. And so, again, when you read my 2021 report, I just wanted to be clear and for the record that the property is in between these two areas. And so I interpreted that as the habitat was not actually mapped by the town for shellfish because it was not indicated as shellfish habitat. But again, that was my interpretation, and I don't want you to be surprised when you read that.
Okay. All right, thank you. Just a couple more questions. So anyways, my concerns are there. To me, it needs a variance for the shellfish habitat. It needs a variance for the water depth. Those are things that are concerning to me. The last comment, in the salt marsh, I think it's less impactful than some recent applications we had, but it's still a consideration. Our regulations and bylaws require no changes to the productivity of salt marsh. So those three concerns are there. The last is kind of just a housekeeping thing. I've heard references several times to anoxic sediments, referring back to the sediment sampling report, and I can't find any analysis in that report that confirms they're anoxic. I've done quite a bit of digging there. I quahog a little bit to the north of here, but not too far from here over the years. And you always get quahogs. I've dug down at this footprint, and I'm finding worms, a few quahogs, overwintering green crabs. I would expect these sediments might be hypoxic. I would not expect them, they don't appear to be anoxic. So were the sediments actually tested for anoxia in this sampling report?
Through the chair, Brad, that's a really good question. I would have to say, because of the way we do the initial sampling, we do it by sediment first to see if there'll be a chemical test required if we are able to move forward with the dredging. And I got up on the screen there, sample S-2, which you can find on the plan indicated where it was taken. And you can see way over to the right, it's greater than 24.4% fines. Under the water quality cert application, if you're greater than 10% fines, then you're basically in material that contains all kinds of things that would be associated with anoxicity as opposed to just hypoxicity, because that would mean that there are chemicals that can bond to the materials because of the fine nature of the material, such as heavy metals, PAHs, and semi-volatiles and things like that. So I would lean towards, because of the way Pam described her walking through the area and our sediment sample, that it's probably leaning more towards really bad, not so good stuff.
Yep, all right, thank you. I agree with that. I think it's an important distinction in terms of a request for variance to.
Yeah, this is Pam here. I would also like to add that, our sampling was done early in cold water weather. I would guess that when the water heats up, when in the summertime, in the spring and the summer, I would guess that this whole area is anoxic, because you'll have a greater amount of bacterial growth, you'll have algal growth, and the surface will be smothered with the algae and the anaerobic bacteria that thrive and make that hydrogen sulfide smell. So maybe in the wintertime it's hypoxic perhaps, but in the summertime, I would say from my past experience sampling in this kind of habitat, it would be anoxic.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Jim?
Okay, I just have one quick question. Have you as yet identified a site where the dredge material is going to be disposed of?
Through the chair, yes, we would have to dispose of this material, even though it's less than 100 cubic yards, at a DEP approved site. And there's one site that we do use on the Cape, it's in Dennis, it's called Child's Landfill. And we would have to go through a process of of them accepting the material. We'd have to go through the 401 water quality certification with the state. And if it's, yeah, so we definitely would have to dispose of it in an upland site.
Okay, thank you.
Alan, question? Wayne, do you have any
No,
questions?
I'm all set. No.
Yeah, I just have a couple of comments and questions. And this is in the absence of Commissioner Ketchum not being here tonight. I know he's raised questions on the methodology on shellfish samples in the past and is concerned about portraying a large footprint in which you're sampling, where in actuality it's a segment of that, and then drawing some hypotheses from the smaller that it applies to the larger. And so I'm not necessarily in favor of seeing the salt marsh transected and considered to be part of your sampling when it's really not. So it's just a comment. Now, the other thing, I agree, we do need to clarify if it's a mapped shellfish habitat, and I think we can do that ourselves. We can do that through Heinz, probably, right?
Yeah, I mean, Heinz and his predecessor generated the report, so, or
Yeah.
generated the map, and yes, we certainly need to update them.
Yeah, because I've heard some comments that it was a Scrivener's error in that as well, that, it shows a gap between the two areas, but in actuality, it's all one,
Yeah,
so.
that's how I interpret it, but I'm more than happy to ask that of Heinz.
Yeah, okay. I do agree with Amy's comment about shortening the length of the pier, the walkway where it crosses the bank. I don't think it needs to come up quite as high as it is necessarily on the bank. And I do remember this presentation from, what was it, a year or so ago when it came in. And the concern that I had at that time, that I'll echo again, is the dredging. I have no problem with maintenance dredging, but I'm always a bit concerned with improvement dredging, because my fear is that, especially in an area which has high currents like the Herring River does, that this dredged area will fill in very quickly, and suddenly the 2.5 feet that you have for clearance is significantly less than that. And I'm not convinced that property owners always are concerned enough to go back in and do the maintenance dredging that's then required to maintain that depth. In this particular location, the thing that concerns me is north of the proposed dock, the plan shows that there's a large area of anoxic mud, which I think would be prone to drifting downstream into the dredged area fairly quickly. And then we're right back to where we started as far as having adequate depth for the dock. So I don't know how to address that, whether we would require annual surveys of the depth and corresponding dredging on a regular basis, or not. But it's one of the reasons I don't like improvement dredging like this. That's pretty much all that I have at this point. With that, I expect that you want to move this off at some point in the future. How much time do you think you would need, Don?
Sure. I think Todd might want to say one or two things, because Amy raised a couple of questions about the type of piles, the materials.
Thank you.
And
Yes.
the conflict between the narrative and what's on the plan. So I'll let him speak to that. But as far as the main comments about the dredging, I think we can look into that because of this location, the shallow nature of the area, that maybe we can look at velocities to see if we can show the commission that it won't fill in as quickly as you think, but that typically when we get dredge permits, let's say from the Army Corps, they're revisited on a 5-year window. And it might make sense to think about that instead of every year in terms of doing some kind of monitoring. Although monitoring might make sense because then you have some kind of control over this variance that you'd be issuing so that it's not just left and then the next thing you know, you got 6 inches of water and people using motorboats and causing all kinds of issues. So I think we understand what you're saying, Ernie, and I respect that. So we'll go back to the drawing board on that to see what we can come up with on our end, and you folks can think about it on your end, and then maybe we can meet in the middle maybe or something like that. But I hear the concern for sure.
Okay.
Don, do you want to say something about that?
Sure. No, thank you, Don. Yeah, when we start on the dredging first, Ernie, I understand your concerns about improvement dredging. As we understand, the regs are the regs. You try not to do improvement dredging unless there's, some some water quality improvements to it or some improvement to habitat, which we have demonstrated here that we unfortunately do have sediment that is anoxic and not greatly conducive to good shellfish habitat. You might have a shellfish here or there, but the bottom line is by removing it, we improve water quality, we improve shellfish habitat. The way I had my team design this was, as you can see, the contours are much wider than just the float itself. We've taken into account a much more gradual approach in kind of matching some of the contours of the riverbed in this area to minimize accretion due to sediment transport. One of the things I might ask the commission is, as part of mitigation, there is that big area to the north of the anoxic mud that Don mentioned. Maybe part of mitigation is we go and remove that as well at this time and make a better footprint of area. We tried to balance the request for dredging to improve water quality, to obtain the water depth for floats. But if we were to look at improving habitat by removing that anoxic mud and providing even a larger area to reduce sediment accretion, that's something that, maybe we can consider and talk to the client about and approach that away as a mitigation to this dredging, this improvement dredging. So, happy to understand if the commission would be interested in that. And that's something that we could consider and look at it. We went larger than we normally would for dredging to get on it. Like if we had an existing dock and we were trying just to meet the current regulations, it's an existing dock. We want to improve it. They have a float here. They don't meet the 3 feet depth. So we're going to dredge a small area to improve that. It's much smaller than what we're proposing here, typically. So open to that as a discussion for mitigation. But I'll leave it at that. And if you have any comments, happy to hear them.
Okay. No, good. Thank you.
In regard, so before I get as far as pile specifications, Amy, I apologize. It's one of those things. We have so many different commissions that have different types of materials, and some allow CCAs, none require. Some don't allow it, and I apologize. This will meet non-leaching, so it'll be most likely Green Heart for the materials, and we'll clean that up in the plans.
It's not a problem. We don't have specifications. I just wanted to know which it was, so.
Yeah, so we'll clean that up and make it meet the town requirements. CCA is definitely more readily available. Green Heart is, we just have to plan it better, that's all. In regard to a couple of comments in regard to shellfish impacts with piles and in this area, understanding the small amount of pile impact, I just want to maybe point out the fact that because the salt marsh is a vast area in a shallow area, we only have technically 4 piles below the salt marsh, which would be shellfish habitat area that we were talking about before, where we don't dig up the salt marsh to sample for shellfish. So you have 4 piles in that area. Very small impact in that regard. And we're actually, by improving dredging and removing that mud, the scour effect around that, the amount of shellfish impacted by that, those 4 piles is minimal. And I understand it's a variance, and we have on numerous occasions and specific to this application in discussions with Heinz Prof have received positive feedback that he is not concerned about shellfish habitat with these 4 piles or this dock in general, and supports it. And I don't know that if he's provided a supporting letter or not yet. We are understanding that he will from the Shellfish Constable. So, you know, understanding Brad's concerns, the end result is 4 piles are not going to make or break the shellfish habitat. I think it's more about water quality and removing some of the undesirable materials. And as far as monopod design, we tried to minimize through the salt marsh. We are still concerned about ice impacts on the pile, so we still have some of that to go through and design, but by having the double pile at the last bend supports the lateral loads that are required. So I think we'll be fine there. And we are proposing a boring just to get pile information so that we know that we're designing it correctly and we don't have any issues with pile uplift on monopiles in the salt marsh area due to ice or anything like that. And then lastly, I think, you know, I completely understand everybody's concerned about going further up on the coastal bank. We went more for just access for the owner. It's already a mowed lawn. We felt we went to the top of the coastal bank to allow the owner to be able to access it from the flattest part possible. And we dropped down to the minimum required for clearance for salt marsh and access for the public below mean high water. So we're at elevation 11 for the pier. I think we can easily, you know, even just bury that elevation 11 back to the coastal bank so that it's a flat surface, or build somewhat of a ramp so that it's lower and has less impact further up the bank. I don't see that as an issue. And that'll actually eliminate steps. So that might even be better for the client as to what they're looking for. So if there's any other questions that I missed in my notes, let me know and I'll happy to answer them.
One other comment that I'd like you to look at for the next meeting too is you have 3 monopiles that are presently in the salt marsh. I know on other projects that we've reviewed, we've questioned the need to have that many. And oftentimes the engineers have been able to come back and say, no, we can eliminate 1 or more of the piles. So would you look at that for us as well?
We can look at that. We will. I will tell you that we're already at 15-foot span. From an engineering standpoint and stability, I don't like spanning it much further than that for lateral issues and it feeling like it's rocking if you're not designed right. So that's where we set it. We looked at that. We had as much consideration as we could, but I will revisit it and provide some supporting documentation for that.
Okay, thank you. So with that, go back to the question, when would you like to come back to us?
Well, I'm trying to think of what else we need to provide you other than just some the issues on the information on the piles. I think the riverfront, Amy, you need from us as far as the performance standards.
Yep, performance standards for riverfront. Mitigation.
2021 survey.
I have that. If I can't for some reason find the 2021 survey from Michelle, I'll ask, but I'll look for it tomorrow and provide it to them. Mitigation, I mean, you talked about potentially greater dredging. I don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, and because we don't know if that's going to be palatable, you know, so I would encourage you to look at other forms of mitigation, either shellfish mitigation or...
I think we're interested in shellfish mitigation in addition to the dredging mitigation, and we're also considering, I don't think there would be an issue with along the edge of the existing salt marsh where the lawn comes right down to it, providing a coastal vegetative buffer there.
That was going to be my suggestion, is to have a better naturally vegetated buffer to the salt marsh. Yeah.
So I think we'd be interested in that, and we can provide that. I'd like to say that we could have it for the next hearing, so if we do that, but if we can't get it, can we ask for a continuance to the following one?
That's fine. So our next meeting, is April 6th. We would, which is actually 3 weeks away. We have a 5 Wednesday month, so we would just need new information the week prior, the Wednesday prior.
I think we can do that, and if it comes out that something comes up but we can't, we'll request a continuance.
All right,
All right.
April 6th.
Okay, so can we have a motion then to add this to the agenda for April 6th meeting?
Okay. I'll move that we continue the hearing on the notice of intent for 14 Mill Point Road, map 1, parcel J1-94, until the meeting of April 6th, 2022.
Here's a second, please.
I'll second it.
Thank you, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Good. We will hopefully see you next 3 weeks.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay.
So the next item on the agenda is discussion on possible vote on 65 Snow Inn Road, a dock storage violation.
Yep, so, the owners may be on the line. Is there somebody in the audience for 65 Snow Inn Road? Hearing nobody, I'll describe it. So
No, I'm here. Hey, Amy, can you hear me?
I can.
Hello? Oh, hi. Hi, guys. It's Alan Curtis. I live at 65 Snow Inn Road.
Hi, Alan.
Thanks so much for getting me on so quickly. And I got to say that over the last year, I've tuned in a lot because my neighbors, the Ebbins, applied for a dock, and they're doing a lot of bank mitigation. And so it's actually been really interesting to watch and see the amount of complexity that you all deal with is really impressive. So we really appreciate it. Anyway, my issue is more simple. So we bought the house 5 years ago. We used cross-rip services, and our float's always just been stored on the muck marsh area, and apparently that's not kosher anymore. And y'all sent a notice in February, but we moved at our house up north from Weston to Framingham, and so it went to our old address, and it didn't get forwarded till last week. So we just heard about it last week, and I'm totally on board with that. And if that's the new regulation that we can't store it there, and we'll take it out. But what I would ask is that it's so late in the season now. I've already contacted Cross Rip. Would it be okay if we just put our float back on our dock? I think that could be done really quickly, and we'll get it off the marsh grass. And then next year, of course, we'll store it off site.
To me, that is acceptable, but I would want to hear from, I believe it's Chris DiPaolo, who now owns Crossrip.
Right.
How soon is soon? Because it is damaging the marsh there. And we prohibited.
Yeah, I called him yesterday, and I talked to Skip. I talked to Skip as well,
Oh.
and I know that I know a couple of other people are in the same boat, and have also requested to try to just get it on their docks ASAP.
Yep.
And it'd be great if y'all could give me the same courtesy, and I will work really hard to get it off ASAP. Like I'd do it tomorrow if I could.
I'm fine with, instead of having them take it off site, it is already the middle of March, so letting them put it back out on the end, I'd like to see that within about 2 weeks.
I'm all for that, Amy.
And I appreciate your interest in being here. So it's up to the commission. We did levy a fine. It sounds like this owner, is willing to make the change and make it a permanent one for the season. So I could be, okay with removing the fine.
I'd be comfortable with removing the fine if the dock is off the marsh in 2 weeks.
Okay, so we can hold the fine until then.
We have
but
some
then-
discussion on that?
Sure, go ahead, Brad.
I'm really concerned about this situation, so that the dock has been there for at least 6 months, and it was there last year. And it's not a new regulation, it's what, 10 years plus old? The no docks, the off-season storage?
I don't remember.
Yeah, it goes way back, and so to me, we discuss and argue about impacts of future docks, and the footprint under this dock is dead in 6 months. So from a practical standpoint, it makes sense to me to say, okay, let's just not move it twice and just put it in as soon as you can. But I'm real concerned about relaxing the fine. I don't know why we would. To me, it's egregious. The contractors know what our rules are. We've sent letters many times. And, you know, I brought it up in November, and nothing happened.
Well, let me ask, as an alternative, you say the footprint's dead. That salt marsh, I assume, underneath.
Unless it got up and moved around, then it might not be completely dead, but it might have a bigger scar.
It slides there because it's on 2 lines. And correct me if I'm wrong, Alan, it's tied to the end of the dock and then tied to the shore, so it moves,
Yeah.
which is.
That's exactly right, Amy. And as you know, our end of the harbor is a mess. And, you know, we have that drainage pipe that which just got repaired, and hopefully they're going to put in some filters. And so we're just sitting on pretty gross muck there, and that's basically where that float sits. And so you know that's a bummer, and obviously you know we need a lot of improvement in that area, which I am all for. I will support anything and pay for anything that can improve the environmental quality of that corner. And if step one is removing that dock, I'm all for it. But unfortunately, we just bought the house a few years ago, and that dock's been there for 20 years. So we just did the same thing that's been there forever. And and moving forward, of course, we won't have it there again.
The alternative I was thinking of then was have the $300 put toward remediation or replanting of the salt marsh there.
That's fine.
I'm totally fine with that, Amy.
Yeah, I mean, I did see it a couple of times this year, sitting physically on the marsh, not on the mucky part. At the high tide, it gets pushed up, so I'm happy to work with you. We do know, I can give you some, I have to give you a few names of people who can do the work or supply the materials, but our goal is not to collect money for fines. Our goal is to restore resources, so if you're willing to do a little marsh planting, I would be all for that.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, that corner of the harbor where that culvert is, they're going to be doing restoration up in there as well.
Yep, they are.
Yeah, they already started.
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, you could tie in with them and, kill 2 birds with 1 stone, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that corner needs a lot of work, and obviously, I'll be pretty involved with that, working with the Evans and, and whatever we can do to improve that corner moving forward is important.
Are you comfortable with that,
Oh, yeah,
Brad?
that's fine. I just thought it needed some discussion,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and I think that's a great solution.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, that's,
Any other comments?
no, that sounds like a good solution to me.
All right, good. So, do we need anything on this? Possible vote, anything like that? Amy, you've got the
Say,
letter went out?
have the float moved out to, put
2 weeks.
at the end of the dock within 2 weeks, and with my guidance, replant some marsh area.
Yeah. So we need a vote for that?
That'd be helpful.
All right. So I make a motion that we require that the dock storage violation be remedied by removal from the out to the pilings within 2 weeks, and that in lieu of the fine, that the owner will provide restoration to the area where the dock has been sitting. Is that adequate?
I would just like to add one thing, Mr. Chairman, that the restoration be to the extent of the level of the fine. In other words, if it's a $300 fine, we would like that $300 dedicated towards the restoration.
I'm good, I'm fine with that.
Is that about right? Salt marsh plugs?
Yeah, I mean, plugs are, seed, a lot of actually comes in seed now is, like, if you go to marsh mats, that gets expensive. But plugs, I think that's doable.
Okay, all right, so the $300 fine be applied toward, the maximum of $300 from our perspective would be applied toward the restoration.
Correct.
And hopefully the owner will put in more than that if needed.
Correct.
Can we have a second, please?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis.
No, thank you guys. And like I said, I've been able to tune in over the last year, and what you do is really impressive. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night. Thanks so much.
Thank you, good night. All right, next item on the agenda is our proposed changes to the water-dependent structures bylaw in preparation for the May 2022 Harwich Town meeting. We are scheduled to go back before the Board of Selectmen on the 21st of this month.
Yep.
To provide them
Monday.
with an update of the water-dependent structures. And they want to see the other one as well?
They're gonna do both.
They're gonna do both.
Basically, so chapter 310 is wetlands, and the only changes I didn't put on the agenda because there's nothing substantive, but there was only basic minor changes that Attorney Questle from KP suggested to our chapter 310.
Right, I saw those.
Yeah, so I don't think those really, other than you're gonna go to the selectmen and say, we agree with Attorney Questle's comments.
They have that, her
They have
comments.
it. The only thing I would strike is, we've had, on the last page, item M, so the commission shall return any unused portion of the consultant fee to the applicant. She had stricken, unless the commission decides at a public meeting that other action is necessary. We've had that in for a long time. She said in her opinion, Mass General Law, chapter whatever, does not allow for the commission to do anything but return any unexpended money back to the applicant. So we can strike that one portion of the sentence or leave it.
Let's take it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's.
So I would agree with the minor edits, nothing substantive that were really made to 310. The bigger one is chapter 304, the water dependent structures bylaw. Brad and Ernie and myself were here 2 weeks ago or so and presented. They just wanted the changes, and that's when we alerted the Board of Selectmen that instead of kind of a moratorium with no end to it, that the commission had discussed a 5-year moratorium on new docks in the Herring River. Since then, we did get comments from council on that, and that's kind of the purpose of the discussion tonight, to determine, this is really the last, does the commission want to stay the course with the language you've proposed, which is a 5-year moratorium in order to do a study, or considering the comments that were made by Attorney Questle, did you want to potentially look at that again and either potentially reduce the term or just discuss the moratorium?
And would you repeat the concern she
Sure.
had?
So in particular to the moratorium, the comment from Attorney Questle was that in order to enact a moratorium or limits on permits, a municipality must first show a rational reason for its action. See Grace and Co. versus Cambridge City Council. Further, the town must outline the steps that must be taken to address the concern. Also, the timing of a moratorium must be reasonable, as the Supreme Judicial Court recognized in Zuckerman versus Hadley, that communities were entitled to pass bylaws to give them breathing room for periods reasonably necessary for the purpose of growth planning generally or resource problem solving specifically as determined by specific circumstances of each case. That was Zuckerman. Further, open-ended moratoriums or limits on permits was stricken by Land Court in Lorden versus Templeton. Therefore, in my opinion, the commission will need to show that there is an existing problem or concern, identify the steps to cure the problem of concern, and that it is reasonable that those steps require 5 years.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, I mean, I would just like to make a few comments with regard to how we came about with the 5 years. I mean, I think what the determination was at first, 5 years is the maximum. The way that we had drafted it, it was until the conclusion of the study, the ability for this commission to review the study, determine whether any action should be taken, which may result in redrafting regulations, which would require public hearings, vote by town meeting, approval by the Attorney General's office. What we figured was that, in discussions with Amy, we would need a minimum of a 2-year period just for the field research in the study to see what was going on in the river over 2 different, year periods. So if you take a look at the 2-year period, the fact that reviewing the results of a study, which may not be done, say they do 2 years of field work, it may be 3 years before, another year after that before they have something to present to us, for us to review, make a determination whether or not it requires the changing of our bylaws in order to reflect or to solve the problem, if any, that was discovered in the study. Get it to town meeting, which can take another 6 months to a year. Then have it go through public hearings, the Board of Selectmen, town meeting, and then eventually going to approval by the Attorney General's office. I think in my determination, the best that we could do that whole process in would be 3.5 to 4 years. We drafted the term in the proposed bylaws to be until all that process is completed, but not to exceed 5 years, in order to give us some emphasis, not to just sit on things, but to keep things moving. So the 5 years is a drop-dead date, no matter what happens, but it could be earlier than 5 years if we get through that process before that time.
Okay. Thank you. That's a good recollection, I think, better than I had of this.
Well,
So
because I think I was the one that drafted it, didn't I?
Yeah,
No,
I
I
gave you
thought
some
that was-
homework. I said,
Yeah.
you could do this better
That's
than
all
me.
right. I enjoy doing that.
I mean, one of the concerns that I've heard expressed at the hearings is the 5 years. People are focused on 5 years, and they said,
Right.
I can't do anything for 5 years. And that's not necessarily the case. It may be less than 5 years.
Could be as short as maybe 3.5.
Yeah, and I wonder if we want to change the language to something we had discussed earlier along the lines of a minimum of 2 years, not to exceed 5 years, for us to conduct this study.
See, my thought is 2 is not practical. I just
3
can't-
then.
I can't see it happening.
Well, maybe it won't. I don't know. I don't think any of us know, because we've not, at least I haven't had any, maybe you've had more experience than I have with this,
I
Brett.
think Jim's assessment is really kind of about what I would expect,
People are going to view that as a 5-year moratorium.
Ernie, it is clearly a moratorium. When we talk about it in the public, we can talk about it as a moratorium until we've completed, this process, and we can outline that process that we would have to go through. But in no way would we go beyond the 5 years.
Right.
So that if we didn't finish the process by 5 years, the moratorium's gonna end.
Right.
So if the study, or if we get hung up on town meeting, or we get hung up on, approval by the Attorney General's office, the moratorium will automatically end at 5 years.
I understand that, yeah.
But, I mean, I think my concern is that the people that are making the complaint that it's 5 years are not reading the language carefully. And in reviewing regulations, you have to read the language carefully. And I would have concerns about putting, a 2-year study or something like that, because we may not be able to do it in that time.
Well, I'm not saying we would.
Okay.
But I'm saying a minimum of 2, no more than 5.
But I don't think we need a minimum.
I don't think we need a minimum.
No?
No.
I know what you're saying. You want to give like a more definite parameter, it seems, so I get that.
And even if we put in a minimum, the people that are opposing this are gonna still focus on the 5.
Correct.
All right, well, I'll defer to, here. You comfortable with that, Alan, leaving it pretty much where it is?
No, I'd like to make a comment. With all due respect to all the other members, and I wasn't here when all this started. And hearing both sides of the spectrum, residents, private owners, property owners, commissioners, I think of this as a situation that we put on all the applicants that come before us for anything, an RDA, notice of intent, all those things. They have to prove to us that what they're doing is not gonna be an impact within due time. They submit their application, they send out things to notice to abutters, they do a formal presentation, they hire experts in the fields, engineers, botanists, everybody that you can claim to for their proof, the onus on them to prove their application. We give them a meeting, they come here, sometimes we deny it or continue it for a month. Did that this evening. We asked the applicants to continue for a month. We asked them to bring back all that information within a month. Why does the town of Harwich need 5 years to do something when we're doing the regulations and we're trying to uphold all the citizens to it? Why does the town need 5 years to do something when we put the onus of proof on the applicants, be it a 2-week period, a month, possibly 2 months? So that's where I come from. I don't think the town of Harwich, and the detriment, I don't know much, I'm not a scientist or any of that thing, and I'm not claiming to be, but I'm just coming from common sense and being a resident. I just don't know the 5-year term, the way that you spoke to it, I understand what you're saying. I don't know if that's something that we want to put, is there a real need for it?
Well, let me address that, because this is going to sort of jump into something which I gave Brad a list on. Part of the comments that we've gotten from the public when we've talked about this in prior hearings is that we're doing a disservice by focusing on docks and piers. That the impacts to the river are much broader than that. It's shoaling north of the Route 28 bridge. It's crabs undermining the salt marsh. It's all myriad of issues that are having a negative effect on the river.
How would we solve that?
Well, I mean, this is, and this is, I put this together I'm not wed to anything on here, but it's more just, there's one more.
If we're talking about it, I have to have one for the record.
Oh, you have one, right, okay.
It's just things to think about, potentially expanding this survey, this study that, yes, docks and piers is number one. This is the thing that sort of motivated this, but our concerns are much broader than that with all the discussions we've had. Every meeting we have where we have a dock and a pier, we talk about sediment source banks. Is it or is it not? Can we map those on the river? That would be easy to do and would know right off the top of our heads. Somebody comes in, I'm sorry, that's sediment source, you can't disturb that. We've had so many requests for aquaculture, and that might be a positive impact to encourage more aquaculture on the river as opposed to we've had a lot of proposals come into us and I think they consistently get turned down or, there's issues with them and that sort of a thing. But, we could take this, abandoned structures, how many pilings have we got up and down the river that are still sitting in the marsh, and, other junk that's up there that should be removed. But why not do a broader survey, which I think fits more closely with Amy's comments as well? And if we're gonna spend the money, let's spend it on something that's not just focused on docks and piers, but we can get some real value out of potentially. Thoughts, Amy?
So one thing, I agree with you. I think it should be a broader, I mean, I think for the purposes of the bylaw, we are focusing on docks. It's a moratorium on docks, so that has to be a highlight, but I think the other portions are as equally important. Just keep, the funding mechanism that we would use is the wetlands fees, which right now we have about 60 grand in, so.
Yeah.
And we bring in about 10 grand a year. We don't bring a lot in. So with a smaller scope, less money, so we'll put out, sooner rather than later, actually started it today, a little draft of an RFP to put out to look at, solicit bids and comments for what we want to do. But that funding source of what we have, we may have to augment by asking the town for additional money depending on the scope. This, I mean, it's a big study.
Can our in lieu fees go toward this?
Our in lieu fees can, what I'm saying, yes, I'm sorry. Yes,
So that adds to the pot a little bit.
thank you for mentioning that.
I don't get feedback. I mean, what do you guys think?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right, Ernie. That's fine. Yeah, you were focused on Amy's comments. Okay, let me make comments in two different areas. First, I would like to respond to Alan's comment because, while I think Alan has a very good point, what I think I realize, and this comes from a lot of my previous experience when I was working as an attorney in Boston, is that the consultants and all that come in front of us representing applicants, while granted they have a professional responsibility, they are being honest, but we also have to remember that they're advocates for their clients. The purpose of us doing a study is that it would be an independent study that would be done where the Conservation Commission is the client, not an applicant for approval of a certain project. So to me, that's the sort of differentiation between what's being presented to us on applications and what the study would give us. Now, the second comment is I would wholly support Ernie's concept of broadening the scope to the extent we could afford it. If we broaden the scope of this study, though, it does sort of put a different spin on the moratorium. And if we review all the comments that we have received on the, on the proposals, it appears as if the moratorium is the only thing that there is strong opposition to. There seems to be almost unanimous approval of the other regulations that we're trying to put into place. So that brings up the question, and I'm not saying I support this, but I'd like to bring up the question of, do we drop that one paragraph in the proposed regulations? Now, the other thing that I wanted to make while I have the forum is that, Amy had sent out Amy Quessel's comments on the wording, and a lot of it had to do with specific wording. I agree with Amy that, it's predominantly not substantive. However, we've been in this process for a long time. We've reviewed the wording. We have put that wording out to public forums. People have looked at that wording and reviewed it. My feeling is that the advice that Amy gave us, while I'm not saying it's wrong or anything like that, is not being given in a timely manner. And as I was practicing law in Boston, advice not given in a timely manner is not worth anything. And it raises the question to me, if we change the language, do we have to go back through public meetings? Do we have to just, You display this to everybody who has reviewed the previous drafts. So I have some real concerns about making changes with regard to comments that we received at this stage. If those comments were received in January, before we took official votes on this, then fine, yeah, we could draft them in, and then our official votes and the hearings that we had would be based on that wording, but they weren't. And that gives me great concern. So those are my three major comments.
Okay. Brad, do you have any thoughts?
I like your idea of expanding the study, but I still think that the purpose of the study should be primarily to address the concern about these water-dependent structures. You know, we've been, you know, dealing with this issue for a long time, and to me, the impacts are apparent. Maybe it's crabs, maybe it's all shading. You know, I'm seeing impacts with these structures, and to me, I'm frustrated that we can't make more progress through the permitting, as you know, Alan suggests. So to me, you know, the Wetlands Protection Act sought 40 years ago to eliminate impacts of water-dependent structures to salt marsh. It's still happening, and the voters of this town in 2009 approved the last changes that said no new structures in shellfish habitat. And so I think it's really time to have the voters look at this and decide what they want.
I do too.
Yeah, so I'd like to stay the course. I think it's on us to really endeavor to get that study, you know, going, and to make sure it can happen as quick as possible. And I like to expand it, but I still think it needs to really address the dock and pier question in Herring River, first and foremost.
May I ask one follow-up question? Yeah. The gentleman we talked about, Greg from Bassett
Greg
County,
Berman, yep.
would he be available to do this as a?
He is
objective
not,
viewpoint?
so he's a coastal geologist. He doesn't look at structures necessarily.
No, but he could relate that to the impacts of the existing structures, right?
To answer the question, I think,
Potentially,
I
but-
picture like a peer review team,
Yeah, this isn't.
taking the study as a draft and having a peer review team. He'd be great to be on that team. Is that
Yeah,
something
yeah,
that-
I think I would see him as part of a team rather than solo on this, because if you're talking, he's not an expert on shellfish. He's not an expert on some of the things the parameters that we're gonna be looking at. Is he valuable as a member? Absolutely. Can I make a quick comment?
Yeah.
So, on the 21st, the selectmen are gonna have Brad and Ernie present to present this a final time. The selectmen have voted in the fall to place the item on the warrant. So I would say, I mean, hopefully they still feel that way. They've already voted to do that. The vote is really to whether or not to support it. They don't have to support it to place it on the agenda, so just keep that in the back of your mind. Obviously, you want them to, everyone wants them to. In regards to Alan, your point about timing, I completely hear that. You know, we're asking 5 years, which is a long time, when they have to turn things around fairly quickly. But I do know the back end of things pretty well of these projects. I meet with these people well in advance, and I know some of these projects, before we even see them, between the Shellfish Studies, the engineering, some of these projects are in the works for between 1 and 2 years prior to it getting to our table. So they have their homework to do prior to, and I view this as our homework, except our homework has to be a couple seasons, and then it has to go through a public review process. So I understand what you're saying, but I think I agree that 3.5 to 4 years is probably where this would take. I would like to, I have less of a concern about the time frame as I do potentially about the thing that Attorney Questle noted, the outline, the steps that will be taken to address the concern. So we've said we're gonna do a study. Great. We've started drafting an RFP. You provided some good comments today, which I will make public to whoever wants them, who might be interested. but we don't have the concrete parameters out. So that's a little hesitation on my end about how this would go. Something you may want to consider as we go is, and this would impact what Jim was saying about changing what we're doing, is instead of a moratorium, do the study anyways, regardless if the moratorium passes or not. But instead of that, maybe consider a larger setback for structures in the Herring River.
That would be a different bylaw change, which would be another
I could
year.
check, but I believe you can make, if it came to that, you could make that change on town meeting, at town meeting.
At town meeting, as an amendment. Well, I think that I would be prepared to look into that. By way of background, so, we had so many hearings on this, and the setback was something that I advocated well before the moratorium, really. And it got a fair amount of pushback from town staff, Harbor Master's Office, consultants. To me, the 65-foot goes way back. It's an old number to me. And from a navigation standpoint, you would never want to see it be less. And then from an environmental standpoint, you wouldn't mind seeing it more. The voters went with a 250-foot setback in Pleasant Bay in 2009. That just eliminated the problems in Pleasant Bay. I think that's almost overly restrictive.
It's because it's an ACEC is why that happened. Herring River's not area of critical environmental
And I agree,
concern.
but to me,
But it did.
the impactful features of Herring River are far greater than Pleasant Bay, given the tidal flow. So, I wouldn't mind looking into the setback, but it would be, I think, a counter move at the public hearing. We have all this good stuff with wetlands. We have good stuff with the dock and pier tweaks. I'd like to see those approved, along with the 5-year moratorium and study. And so I'd hate to say we're going to change the setback now and have to skip it, miss the public hearing. I mean, the
I'm just
town
saying
meeting.
to have that in your mind, essentially.
Yeah. Yep, I basically have that, but I also am worried about this. Say that happens, and someone like me can just make an amendment, make a motion to make a change on the floor. Does that have the full support of the commission? I don't think it does. So I don't know how I feel about that. Say I say 90 feet. I could make that, I think I could do that. But I don't know if I'd be comfortable doing that without support of the full commission. And for me, the numbers we threw around were 250, 150, and 90. And at one point, we had Coastal Engineering say he was okay with 75. So there was even, at one point, thoughts of bumping it up a little bit.
We did have, we had back and forth back a year ago, 2 years ago.
And then it got pushed out. But to me, that was a step. I wasn't advocating a moratorium initially. That was kind of the step. Jim, former member, he had great concerns over what was happening in that stretch of Herring River between the bridges. And so we kind of evolved towards a moratorium. But I think the setback can be discussed. I don't know how we do that outside of getting the full grace of the commission. I don't know, how do we do that without delaying?
I don't, no,
Well-
I'd have to vet that.
Excuse me. Anybody know how to stop that on these damn things? Does it all day long.
That gavel.
Yes.
I don't have one. That's how you stop.
After we talk to the selectmen on the 21st and get a sense from them, if they don't endorse this, then maybe we want to consider that as an amendment.
Okay. And then would it have to come back to us, and then we'd miss the town meeting?
No.
They promised
Yeah.
in the fall that it would be on the warrant. Whether or not they endorse it or not,
Right.
it's on the warrant.
Yeah.
So
But we could
talk about that.
discuss the setback as a commission at the April 6th meeting if we needed to, after the 21st.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
wouldn't have the language in the town meeting booklet, what would be on, it would not
Understand,
change.
but if you made a motion from the floor, at least you'd know you'd have the back end of the commission one way or the other.
Right. My preference would actually be to let it rip at town meeting and let the public decide. And then if it fails, then we get back as a commission and say, okay, we're pulling out the moratorium because people didn't want it, but let's get these other good things back on the table for the fall town meeting.
So,
I don't know if we'll have a fall this year,
We-
just,
yeah.
I think it's gonna, we're trying not to have a special in the fall.
yeah. A motion on the floor like that is dicey, because, you know, there's a number of things that can happen.
Yeah.
And I would certainly support that myself if I was there, but I would feel a little bit odd about, does the commission support that?
Yeah, I think it'd be hard for people to wrap their head around what does 65 to a 90 mean,
Right.
you know?
And I haven't even done the math as to who it would exclude. Would it exclude 2 properties? Would it, you know, I like
Don't know
the
either.
5-year pause. And then, okay, we learned this, you know, by the way, it was all crabs. Okay, well, we're back to permitting things. And so I think the conditions that I'm seeing are significant enough and have been lingering for long enough that this study is really important. So I'd favor doing that, and maybe we can discuss, you know, if the setback comes into play, you know, later on.
Yep, that's fine.
But I'm not even sure, can a commission member advocate at a town meeting that way to make an amendment to change something like that without having the full commission behind it? I don't know if that's appropriate.
Kind of a similar thing as the hunting thing, to be honest. It's like a citizen petitioning something that the commission has control over, and it's
Yeah.
ultimately the commission who has to decide. But it is it's a general bylaw of the town, and I will ask for clarification of that. Would think in the least what you could do, because we want to see those other improvements go forward regardless. So I think an amendment to remove one portion, say the moratorium, and keep everything else, I think that would be okay.
Keep the study.
Well, the study, I think we don't even need the vote at
Yeah,
town meeting at
right.
all, because we have the
don't need
money, we
anything to
can,
do the
That's
study.
true, because it's
Yeah,
just,
we
the
don't need the
moratorium
vote.
is to time
Right.
to conduct.
Yeah.
it.
And Amy, I think what we need to judge, and I think you're correct, it would be easy just to remove that one paragraph at town
Yes.
meeting.
yeah, you just
If
say
That wouldn't
remove,
require much in the way of
remove B.
explanation.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one paragraph, you know,
Yes.
and,
You're not
And-
changing
right.
parameter.
And I think maybe after the meeting this coming Monday, we need to judge sort of the political reality of whether or not this is going to get through either with or without that one paragraph.
Mhm.
What is this
And
one paragraph you're talking about?
The
moratorium?
5-year moratorium paragraph.
Yeah,
Because there seems to be almost unanimous
Support for the other things.
support for everything else that we're doing.
from the consultant community.
Right.
The public would.
We haven't heard any opposition from the public and to the other things, but
Right.
I think the public wants us to do something to protect the Herring River, and the public's not locked in on the water-dependent structure issues, so they, you know, how could they be?
Yeah.
But I think the public wants us to do something, so, I think after we meet, we should discuss this maybe under
Right.
discussion and just see how people feel.
it's fine.
I view it as, it could be a political process if there's amendment on the floor. And so that's something that I'm a little uncertain, you know, how that should go. But I'm perfectly fine letting it, we've talked about this so much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let the town meeting, you know, vote on this.
Yeah. Wayne's been biting his tongue.
I just wanted to say, I said this before, I'm against the moratorium, but I'm definitely for that study. I think it's a good idea. I really do. And the thing is, if you don't have a moratorium, I mean, you know, it's gonna give the people doing the study a little bit more emphasis to speed it up a little bit, because they might want to, initiate a moratorium if they find big problems. It's an incentive to do it a little faster.
Yeah.
We'll do it as fast as we can,
Well,
But-
yeah, that's,
but some of that's not up to those
No,
of
I
us sitting at
understand,
the
but I'm
table.
thinking, even the scientist or whoever's gonna do it, if they are concerned that there might be a problem in the river, they might speed up the process.
But we've seen impacts. I mean, just the boat ride we did, we saw impacts from docks and the scouring and the loss of salt marsh and everything else. New designs might mitigate that, I don't know. I mean, they may, I just don't know, and I'm not willing to state that in a public forum either. So I think the study is necessary. I think the moratorium, if we can do it, is just going to be a prophylactic in case there is something that comes out of the study that says, yes, docks and piers are having a negative impact.
It almost seems as though you're looking at a solution that's looking for a problem.
Well, it certainly has precipitated a lot of the solutions that we're looking for now. I mean, this, I don't think we would have even considered this study without Brad bringing up this issue and it being sort of a persistent theme when we look at these structures. So,
I think there is a problem. Is the problem something that is related to our permitting of docks and piers? Or is it independent? You know, is it sea level rise? Is it crabs? I think the study, you know, I can just picture in my mind, I could write out a draft tonight of all kinds of things you can test. You know, look at shading, look at the, because many of these docks have a footprint under the docks of salt marsh degradation. Not all, but almost all. On the west side, it's amazing. It's like almost every one. And so is that impact to salt marsh because of the dock? That study can tell us.
Yeah.
Is it shading? They can measure. Is it scouring? You know, is it crabs? So I think the problem exists, and I think we're hearing that there is no problem, which to me is a tremendous disconnect from what I've been seeing for a long time. And so, you know, it's a tough message because everybody wants a dock. You know, why wouldn't you want a dock? But that river is such an important resource. I think we really need to try to minimize these impacts.
and I think what came through loud and clear from the comments that we got from people too was, don't limit it to docks and piers. I mean, the letters and everything else said there's more problems on that river than just your docks and piers, so why are you penalizing us? Well, we're not. We're, you know, I want to be able to go to the selectmen and if need be, mention at town meeting that, you know, we've expanded this, that we are looking at the river, not just docks and piers now. And, you know, our goal is to identify what's having a negative impact on this resource.
Right.
And what can we do to fix it?
Yeah.
I think that's our charge, yeah.
So one more question. In your list of things that you wanted to broaden the scope on, so if we did a moratorium, would this impact all of these actions that happen today? Somebody goes down and shellfish, you can't shellfish anymore?
No.
Is that gonna be impacted?
No.
No, so,
No.
all right, so what happens if shellfishing was a problem?
Well, let's
I'm just
say
saying
aquaculture impact, all right? Right now, you apply for an aquaculture permit to put an oyster farm underneath your dock, and a lot of them been told no, I think, in many cases. Haven't they? Well, certainly offshore they have.
We've only,
Oh, offshore, not in the river. We have
we haven't
small
said
score.
no to anything, actually.
Not even
Well, it
offshore,
wasn't
I know.
us, it was,
Yeah,
it
it's more
wasn't us.
navigational
who-
issues.
Yeah, we've allowed aquaculture in the river. Alan, you're meaning like people going digging and how they could impact?
Activities on the river, so, you know, we're looking at structures that are permanent, I understand that study, I got that. But then if we broaden it, we're looking at the whole Heron River, what's going on there, what's impacting? Is it the piers, is it the pirates, is it shellfish, is it tidal rising from warm climate, is it this, is it that, is it nitrogen? I mean, it can go on and on.
Right.
And I'm just trying to narrow it down, I just think, I'm for a study, but I'm not for the 5 years. We already voted on that
Yeah.
a long time ago, so I don't wanna go through that, but, I don't know.
But you're in favor of expanding a study then?
I think, yeah, I think there should be more comprehensive there than just boats and piers, because you do kind of put it towards people that have boats and
Yeah.
ramps and docks, is different things. So I think we should just look at it at a broader scope. We're gonna start with how there's a freshwater, how come there's no shellfish as you go further up to 28? Is it because the fresh water comes down from the Heron River, from the reservoir? Is it the flow of the water mixture there? I mean,
I don't know. We saw oysters up at Sea Meadow.
Yeah, the salinity might be
There.
off a little bit.
Yeah,
fresh water coming in,
salinity,
brackish water, but I mean, I don't.
sediment quality, everything.
So I mean, where does it start and stop? So you had an area up by the bridge on North Road, I believe, is that where it was gonna start the study?
Footbridge?
I picture measurements at every existing dock. That's kind of
No,
what I
but I mean,
think.
how far north are we going? All the way up as far as?
Well, the furthest docks,
Up on North Road.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the numbers, they're not that daunting to me, and so I picture there's some things you can't address. You know, petroleum influences, fuel influences on shellfish. Can't do that. But there's,
Salt from the highway trucks in the wintertime.
but we expand it, we hire a firm that can look at, you know, bridge scouring, and look at a few other issues,
and then you add those on. But you do focus on this one issue, because again, I think our regulations and bylaws says do this, and we often have to approve things under variances. So I think that we really need to clean that up and decide when a variance really should be issued. I think this study could help. If we can redo the shellfish habitat mapping at the same time. And I hate to make work for other departments, but that would be really helpful to.
Maybe it doesn't have to be part of other departments. Maybe it's an independent study that we would then view and adopt to take the work off of other departments.
Right.
That potentially could happen.
Excuse me, Ernie. I'd just like to ask Amy a question. Amy, are you aware of the availability of firms to do this type of study?
Yes.
I mean, are these off-Cape firms? Because I think most of the firms that come in front of us would be conflicted out.
Yep. There's some on Cape that we do not work with.
No, we don't work, okay, good.
Routinely, yeah,
Okay.
in other areas of the Cape. But we would put it out, we have to put it out for.
Okay, no, I know we have to put it out, but there are at least a number of firms that you think might be
Yep.
interested in this. Okay,
I
thank
do.
you.
I think this is a very interesting, huge study for some firms, so.
I think it could translate to a lot of places, but with my job, I work with what's called a master service agreement with the Division of Ecological Restoration. And they have like 20 firms they've lined up to work directly with the state.
Oh, okay, good.
And I can very easily ask, all of them for a bid or part of them for a bid. I think we get that list and then run it by Amy, and she can just see. For the state, they all have to be approved vendors. I'm not sure if you have to have that or not, but it'd be a good list to think about.
We have a vendor list.
Okay.
For a lot, well, I don't know specifically for this, but we have a vendor list for a lot of things.
Yeah.
Pre-approved.
But,
But they have to bid, ultimately, they have to bid. You can't
Right.
really, be like, hey, you do this.
Yeah. It's gotta be firms that have no connection to what we do.
Right.
Really important, I think.
You might have, this is a public discussion, so you might have some comments when you're ready.
I'm ready. So any comments from the audience?
Hi, I'm Michelle Hunton. I know I've spoken on this before. I'll keep it brief, but I just wanted to comment and say that I agree with Attorney Quessel's comment. And the first step of the process that I believe I heard you say, Amy, was that the commission must show a rational reason for the moratorium, and that's sort of what we spoke about. And as part of that, we had said the commission, it's our position that they needed to show concrete evidence that docks or water-dependent structures were causing harm to the Herring River, and we don't think the commission has met that. And I think just kind of in talking about the study, we don't think the moratorium is appropriate, but we do think it's a good idea. And I like the discussion tonight about expanding the study to include
we're losing a
view
little
of
bit.
other.
You're breaking up, Michelle.
You're losing. Okay.
We heard
Can you hear me?
You liked the discussion, that's all I heard.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what the issue is. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
A little bit better?
Yeah.
I think I was echoing before. I was just saying, that I liked the discussion regarding expanding the study to address other issues that might be affecting the Harristown River, such as sedimentation. And I know other issues were raised in the past, like eutrophication can be causing issues. We're still opposed to the moratorium, but I think the fact that the commission, as Amy Quessel had also said, needs to show a rational reason for the moratorium. I think the fact that the commission is acknowledging that there might be other things aside from docks and piers that are harming the river shows that a moratorium on docks isn't rational, because maybe there should be, someone should look at banning fertilizers or other things that cause eutrophication or things that cause other issues with the river. But it seems like we're acknowledging that many things can be harming the river, but singling out docks, and I don't see how that's, I guess, rationally connected from a legal perspective. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Yes, I just have, actually, it's more of a question, because
Could you introduce yourself?
This is Todd Turcotte from Coastal. There was discussion about it, the Board of Selectmen being on the 21st. I was under the impression it was the 28th.
Yep.
Is there something different?
There's a change. So.
Okay.
Yep, so at our
That's fine.
last public meeting with the Board of Selectmen, they had said the 28th, but then this past Monday, they were supposed to have some discussion too on warrant articles, and they didn't. And they asked, basically they asked us what's preferable, the 21st or the 28th, and we picked the 21st.
Okay, thank you. That just accelerates what we need to provide. Thank you.
Other comments? All right.
We'll ask this.
Yeah, hi. Mark Sanjola. Susan had a comment. Go ahead, Susan.
No, if the Board of Select meeting is on the 21st, then we've already missed our 1 week prior to the meeting deadline and comments.
I mean, you'll have to take, that's not our decision on when to meet. We were told originally the 28th, then again, this past Monday, when they didn't get to us, because it was on for warrant discussion, just general, they said the 21st, so I contacted them and said, which one you want, and basically it said choose, so we choose the 21st, so I don't know what to tell you from our end. I don't see how I can fix that.
I just, in terms of public process, is that how that works? It can be I'm just confused that things need to be submitted a week in advance.
So we require the week in advance. The Board of Selectmen, I think would accept things tomorrow, because that's when their packets go out. But you'd have to be in touch with the office downstairs. I mean, they did say this past Monday, which was a public meeting, the 21st. So.
Okay. We'll check tomorrow then.
Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't be of more help there.
No, that's all right.
I mean.
Also, I have another comment. You really need to be careful. I hear Brad Chase suggesting firms he's worked to do these studies. I don't really think that's appropriate. So just as he has no faith in our experts, I'm going to question, you're trying to pigeonhole your own experts into this thing. Thank you.
That's fair.
Other comments? Okay, good. I think we can close this part of the meeting. I don't see that there's any a vote necessary on this.
Can I ask one question about something else?
Sure, Wayne, yeah.
We were talking earlier about the float. Was that in Wichita Harbor?
Yes.
You mentioned something about a culvert. They're gonna do some work. Where does that culvert come from? Is that draining catch basins on Route 28?
1,700 linear feet of catch basins on Route 28.
And there's nothing we can do about it? Get the state to
Oh, we've tried to.
put in a
but
sediment
we do
basin or
have.
something?
Brad's been working on it. I've worked on it. The Evans, the family's been working on it.
Really? If that's a point source, could be a major contamination system, set up, it's an automobile, a truck accident, and a fuel tank spills, and hydraulic oil all over the place, choo, 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 right into Wichita Harbor.
Yeah.
We've, the state tells us that we have to eliminate these outfalls. This is a big one.
Right? Yeah.
And, yeah.
Don't do as I do as I say.
Yeah, you got it.
We've got it before, the Natural Resource and Conservation Service that does a lot of salt marsh, shellfish habitat, and fish run restoration on Cape Cod. And I hope it's at least on one of their lists for potential projects.
I've made note of it.
Yeah, you and I both brought to their attention, and then I contacted Mass DOT, and I haven't got very far with that.
Same.
So.
Well, maybe we should have a protest.
Yeah.
Everybody else is protesting everything.
Yeah.
It's pretty much, it's Harwich Port. It's like 1,700 linear feet.
Really?
We have the plan.
Running from there towards Harwich Port Center, or the other way? It probably is, going towards the center.
Towards the bank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1,700
West.
feet, really?
1,700
Draining
linear
all
feet.
those catch basins.
Yep.
Wow.
And it's an
And
open.
you got gas stations there?
It's amazing, huh?
Yeah. That's crazy. Well, let's fight them.
We're doing what we can. We feel ya.
Okay.
All right, we got some minutes to get through.
Last item is minutes. I hope everybody had a chance to look at them.
I did 3.
I couldn't either. I called, call Melissa if you can't. She made copies
We
and
will make you
hard
copies
copies
if you
for me.
cannot.
and I just picked them up and you worked off
I
of
can
those.
tell you the ones I have no comments on, if that helps, I don't know. Well, if you want to power through them all, I'll review the rest, it's up to you.
Well, I'll let you know, I did go through them all.
Okay.
I've had 2 with no comments, hopefully agree with yours, Brad. The executive session minutes from the 19th and the February 16th, 2022 meeting.
I did the first and last, had no comments, and I did March 3rd, no comments.
So the January 19th of 22, no comments.
Well, no, the December 16th, 2020.
Oh, sorry.
Way back.
Yeah.
I reviewed the first 2 on the list and the last, and then I stuck.
Okay, sorry, my list is a little bit out of order.
But we can, yeah, I know, if you want, we can go, it's up to you, if you want to.
Let's just go through them.
I can give you my comments, but that doesn't get you the vote to approve them.
I think, so why don't,
Want me to just run through my comments for you?
sure.
Would that help?
Or just, can you vote the ones that, you have no comment, that nobody has any comments on? You can vote those and then we can go through the comments on the other ones.
All right, the 2 I had again were the January 19th, 2022 executive session.
Yep.
Had no comments on that. And the February 16th, 2022 meeting.
Does anybody have any comments on those 2?
What was the second one, Ernie?
The February 22nd,
February 16th,
16th, I'm sorry.
16th, I had no comments on it.
So you can move easily to approve those 2.
So can we have a motion to approve the minutes for January 19th executive session and the February 16th, 2022 regular session, please?
Okay, I'll move that we approve the minutes for the January 19th, 2022 executive session and for the meeting of February 16th, 2022.
Wonderful. Second, please?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, good.
Okay,
I say no, because I didn't get to see them. So I abstain.
that's okay.
All right.
So let's go through the rest.
So I'll go through the rest of the ones then. Amy, is that all right?
Yeah, so December 16th, 2020.
Sure. Yep.
2020.
On the first page, under the 49 Snow Inn Road, in the second paragraph, second line, toward the end, it says, "So they have shifted." Do you see that toward the end?
Yep, got it.
Yeah, that. On the next page, down at the last paragraph, was fourth line from the bottom, Mr. Maycath explained that they would use native materials from the borrow pit.
Yep.
Most of these are typos.
Yep.
There are a couple that didn't make sense, but on page 4, right in the middle of the page, in the middle paragraph toward the end, the 5th line from the bottom of that paragraph, we starts mitigation planning, says he would like to see what mitigation has overlapped, and I crossed out if anything with past approvals.
Middle.
I'll give these to you, Amy. You
Yeah,
can-
it's
you
okay.
can have 'em. And then on the 6th page, in the third paragraph from the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th line from the bottom of that paragraph, it said, Mr. Crabtree stated he would like to see the same methods used for recent shellfish surveys going forward. Take out the word used, the second used.
Yep, got it.
And then on the last page, third line from the bottom, it said, could advertise and set up public hearings to discuss these potential, I took out training, so I didn't know what that meant. I just put in concerns instead.
Yeah,
Find that?
concerns.
Okay, that's that one.
All right, okay.
So, do we want to approve these as we go through them? Or do them all at once? We'll go all through.
It's up to you.
March 3rd, 2021. Oh, this was a good one, there was nothing. Page 6, proposed under the 41 Squatum Road. You have a typo in the middle of the last paragraph where it states, Mr. Coleman stated they may wish to put in measures to allow runoff from, yeah, and they go down to the fourth line from the bottom. It starts off in the location of the existing in-ground steps, or they would prefer the steps in ground, or if they would prefer the steps in ground. Take
Right.
off the, if the commission preferred at the end of that sentence, because it didn't make sense.
Yep.
And then on the last page of that one, under the other business,
Sorry, the last page of the minutes?
yeah,
Okay.
under other business, the first sentence there, it says, Ms. Usowski explained that they had a few at Tixiera and one upcoming at Thompson's Field with AmeriCorps Cape Cod, if any commissioners would like to help out. Yeah, I didn't know what that
Projects.
meant. Projects, okay.
Few
And then,
projects.
in the last sentence in that paragraph, sorry to keep you guys with this shit. The last sentence, it said, added to the agenda for, and I crossed out this and said the March meeting. Like I said, you don't have to write them down, I'm gonna give them all to you anyhow.
I know, but,
I'm all here if you want.
okay. Anybody else have anything on that one?
Nice job, Ernie. I just went through it now, but came up with nothing.
Okay. Then I have March 31st, 2021. Under public hearing, item number 1 on the agenda. The second line, it says premises are located at 374 Main Street rather than
Yep.
is located. And third line from the bottom, it's talks about Mr. Cape Cod Tech agreed they could pay Mr. Kukunis to manage the land if someone could manage, if someone would have to,
But somewhat, as someone would have. Yeah,
to meet the requirements, and I didn't know what requirements. You gotta explain what the requirements are. You find that?
Okay, yeah.
On the top of the next page, it says, Mr. Kukunis stated that he had discussed this option with the town administrator. Mr. Kukunis stated that if, cross out the word not, if this project is not approved, he would like the town to put the bog under the care and custody of the Agricultural Commission. Just change the wording in that sentence.
Yep,
It didn't make
got it.
sense. Then the next page, the third, if you go up 2 paragraphs from the bottom, the last line of the second paragraph, take out the word something that they, could be something that they. So it said, Mr. Chase stated that the continued management of the bogs could be something that they discussed on site during the workday if enough commissions were able to attend. I just say, take out those 3 words, something, could, word it instead.
Yep.
Management of the bog could be discussed on site during the workday.
Yep.
Okay, that's done. February 5th, 2022. Page 3, Amy.
Hold on one second.
Okay.
January 5th?
Yeah, I think it is. Yes, yeah.
Okay, page what?
Page 3, the big paragraph in the middle, right in the middle of that paragraph is the line that starts, "We're an issue in salt marshes where the water is not stagnant."
Mm-hmm.
And Ms. Usowski stated, or responded that they, should be they in wrap there.
That they. Okay. Okay.
Then page 5, third paragraph down. Ms. Usowski stated that you need to add in the dock had been stored on the marsh.
Got it.
And then the next paragraph there after that, the second sentence toward the end, so she would issue a fine and send a letter.
Wait a minute.
Find that?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last page, 6,
Mm-hmm.
top paragraph, there's a line that starts off, bogs could not go back out for lease without another vote from the commission, and then take off the end of that sentence. Put a period there.
Yep, period.
There. That one. One more.
Okay.
One last one. It's the January 19th. On page 2, first paragraph, the sentence that starts new information. That had been submitted.
I'll have to look at yours. My eyes are starting to
Okay.
cross.
Yeah. I mean, it's just,
That's fine.
area had no impact. I mean, just typos. Oh, on the page 3, though, under the notice of intent for 20 Chase Street, the second sentence says in bad shape, so the proposed plan would shore it up and also relocate it
Shore
further
it
from the
up.
west. Is it shore?
Yep.
Okay. Alrighty. And then page 5, there's a typo, so I'll just give this to you, you can fix that one. And that's all I had.
Okay.
So, can we get a motion to approve the minutes for, no, I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes for January 19th, 2022, January 5th, 2022, March 31st, 2021, March 3rd, 2021, and December 16th, 2020 with changes. All in favor?
Aye.
So we've got the other ones, we approved, okay.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to abstain on December 16th, 2020, March 3rd, 2021, and March 31st, 2021, because I wasn't present at those meetings. But I'll vote aye for all the others.
Two votes, is that okay?
I got one other question about that outfall thing that's bugging me.
Hold on. Wait 1 second.
Oh, we got
Do we
something else
have,
going on?
I think you can vote if you weren't there, you don't have to.
you can
abstain.
vote if you weren't there.
But I don't think, can we pass them with just 2 positive votes?
If you have no negative,
Can we?
yeah, because we have a
No, I voted
quorum.
for 'em, so yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
and we have a
Yeah,
quorum.
you don't have to
so-
necessarily be here for them, because
Okay.
otherwise you wouldn't be able to clean up these old minutes.
Yep.
That, does Board of Health or anybody just check the water quality at the end of that pipe at certain periods of time?
Not to my knowledge. We only check, health checks water quality at public bathing beaches.
Wow.
The county looks at other things. I don't think that's one of them. Yeah, that's, so they did do some water and sediment quality testing when the Evans, who own the property across the street, came for a dock. They did a water and sediment quality test and did find contaminants. I don't know to the level, but yeah, they did that as part of their project, because they're concerned about the health of the harbor too. Yeah,
Oh,
so it's a problem. Couple quick things. If anybody on Tuesday morning wants to help install plover fencing, I have several hands, but if I could use a couple more.
I'm already, wow.
We got more substantial posts this year, so they might require a little digging and not just hammering in, but Tuesday morning, starting at 9. If the weather's awful on Tuesday morning, we're gonna do Wednesday afternoon. I have several people, but many hands make light work.
You send it.
We're gonna start at Red River Beach at the east end, and then Bank Street is the bigger pain. So what I'm gonna try to do, because we're having heavier duty posts, so we were just using really kind of flimsy wooden posts last year, because that's what we could afford.
Better than the ones the year before.
Yeah. Yes, better than the ones the year before. These are 1 inch, which is what traditionally gets used. I'm gonna see if I can borrow a truck from DPW to drive out at least onto Bank Street, so we can make hauling the stuff easier.
speaking of Red River Beach, have you noticed the shoaling that's going on in the Red River on
Oh,
the
yeah.
Chatham side?
Well, a lot of
I saw
it,
the other day, oh, wow.
a lot of it is, I mean, for a long time, we were putting sand over the edge to dissuade the erosion, if you will. But we can't, it got to the point where you're silting in the river. I mean, typically on the backside of a jetty like that, you get that effect where one side grows and the other side doesn't. But we've stopped putting sand there, and we have that temporary solution of this blocks. But we really need to work towards a more permanent something out there.
The town line is the river, right? Center of the river. So anyway, we can get a hold of the town of Chatham and see if they can get their people in gear to come down on their side and dig out that sandbar that's building up there?
We'd have to, that is not included in the town dredge permit, so we would have to
Yeah, but I mean.
re-permit that.
It's on their side, so it's up to them to.
Oh, yeah, I mean, we have area on ours that's,
Shoaling up too.
Shoaling up
Yeah,
too.
The one I saw was the one that's creeping down from
it's,
from
that's
Chatham.
what's,
Getting ready to cut the
Chatham
channel
is
off.
growing, we're receding, and, but the whole, if you go down there at low tide, it's just, the flat is huge. It used to be a mooring field,
It was a mooring field?
yeah.
Yeah, I know, all the little
Swim,
sailboats and stuff. used to be
snorkel,
down there.
fish, and it's just low tide, you just walk out there.
What happens eventually? The river just plugs up? No flow?
There's not a lot of flow coming out of that river, so
No,
I think storms would probably shape it. Winter storms would probably be influential.
But depending on the direction of the storm, it could blow more sand in.
Right.
So you get a nor'easter, it's coming in from the east, it's not good.
Right.
Yeah,
A lot of changes there.
Yeah.
I think that's all I got for you. So,
Anything else? Are we good?
motion, I'm ready to adjourn when you are.
And we have a motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
We have a second, please? All in favor?
Aye.